Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto decided to train himself alone for better strength and skill part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It was early morning in Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in oranges and yellows. People began to slowly wake up and start their day, merchants getting their shops ready, parents making breakfast for their children, and children getting ready to go to school. Like always, it was a normal day. As the sun shone into his apartment, one Uzumaki Naruto groaned, turning over so the light wouldn't hit his eyes and he could remain asleep and dream of Sakura feeding him ramen as he was named Hokage. Unfortunately, it was not to be as the alarm clock Naruto had set began blaring loudly. Beep, 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 ga, Naruto shouted as he fell out of bed. Blinking, he looked around as his vision began to clear. He stood up and shut off his alarm, yawning loudly as he stretched. He looked back at the alarm clock. It was fairly old and worn from use. Naruto had found it in a trash can and fixed it up. However, he had never actually used it before. For a moment Naruto tried to remember why he had set the alarm clock in the first place. He scratched his belly for a moment in thought before his eyes caught sight of his calendar, more specifically the date with the large red circle. That's right, it's the final exam before I become a ninja. Naruto shouted in a frantic voice as his eyes widened. He rushed into the bathroom, turning on the water of his shower as he took off his pajamas and stepped into the shower. The water was cold, freezing cold in fact, but Naruto had long since learned to ignore it. The owner of the complex was a rather cranky old lady who, like most of the villagers, meaning around 98% of the population, hated his guts. She had long ago turned off all the hot water that went to his apartment, forcing him to take cold showers. Finished washing, Naruto turned off the water, grabbed a towel and dried himself off. Moving back into his room, Naruto moved over to the closet. Opening it up revealed his entire collection of clothes. All of them were a bright orange tracksuit that he had managed to get. He had actually not even bought these, they had been too expensive since he had been charged triple the price for what most people would pay for normal clothing. Naruto had actually been forced to wait until the store owner had finally gotten rid of them, which was what the man had been going to do anyway when Naruto wanted to buy them, and then snatched them from the trash can. He grabbed one of them and went over to the dresser, opening a drawer and grabbing some underwear. He soon put his clothes on and made his way to the kitchen. Opening his cupboard, the blonde grabbed one of his cups of ramen, opening it up and pouring some water in it. He moved over to his microwave and opened it up, placing the ramen in it and setting the timer for 3 minutes. Like all the appliance he had, the microwave was beaten and battered, having been found and fixed up by Naruto after someone had thrown it out. As soon as the beep sounded, Naruto opened the microwave, grabbed the ramen and a pair of chopsticks and made his way out of the apartment. Not bothering to lock the door on his way out, after all, no one ever bothered coming here anyway. Naruto opened the door to the room where he had spent the last 6 years in training to be a ninja. He looked around for a seat and was disgruntled when the only open one he could find was the one next to Uchiha Sasuke, brooder extraordinaire and his ultimate rival. Naruto had never understood the brooding emo king. Everyone loved Sasuke, the girls in his CL, the teachers in his CL, the civilians and other shinobi in the village, everyone. The boy was handed everything on a silver platter, Konoha's golden boy. But for some reason Sasuke remained a cold and aloof bastard. It irked Naruto, who would do anything for the kind of love and attention the raven-haired kid had. Not being able to find anywhere else to sit, Naruto moved over to sit next to the last Uchiha. Tem. Naruto said by way of greeting. HN. Naruto merely rolled his eyes at the response he received, having grown used to that kind of response. Hell, that was the only response Sasuke gave anyone, even the teachers had trouble getting more out of him. The only one quieter than Sasuke was Aburame Shino, a member of the famed Aburame clan, and Naruto was convinced that Kid was mute. I hope you're ready to bask in my awesomeness as I kick today, Tem. Naruto said, seeing if he could get some kind of reaction out of the boy. Naruto grit his teeth in frustration. He was just about to start yelling when Haruno Sakura walked through the door. Sakura was a girl with bubble gum pink hair, and wore a red Chinese-style dress with a white circle in the middle, black mid-thigh length skin-tight shorts and blue shinobi sandals. Like the other girls in his CL, she was a complete Sasuke fangirl. However, to Naruto, she was one of the most beautiful people he had ever met and was the girl he had been crushing on for nearly his entire time at the academy with no success. Not that something as insignificant as 6 years of no success would stop him. Hey Sakura-chan! Naruto shouted enthusiastically as he waved at the girl. Hey about after school you and I. Shut up Naruto baka! Sakura shouted as she smashed a fist into Naruto's face, sending the boy sprawling back onto his seat. I don't want to hear your annoying voice today. And move so I can sit next to Sasuke-kun. With nothing left to say on her part, Sakura grabbed Naruto by the jacket and bodily threw him off the seat. So Sasuke-kun, I was thinking maybe after school we could go on a date together. Sakura asked in a hopeful voice as she twirled her hair in her fingers and gave Sasuke a shy look. Sasuke didn't even spare her a look as he continued to stare out of the window. Naruto winced a bit as he stood up, sighing. He took the seat on Sasuke's left. He had grown used to this over the years. He had lost count of the number of times that Sakura had rejected him for a date, as well as the number of times she had hit him for asking. Sometimes after her particularly more harsh rejections, he would often wonder why he even bothered. Of course, those bouts of depression never seemed to last more than 3 seconds or so. After a while, Iruka, the Chunin Academy instructor for the academy, came in with Mizuki, his eye stand, following close behind him. All right CL, it's time for the test to see who among you are ready to receive their headband and become ninja of Konoha, Iruka said. Naruto grinned. I can do this, he thought with confidence. Naruto had been up late last night training. He was positive that he could complete any test set before him. Now when I call your name, I want you to come into the next room and perform the Bunshin no Jutsu transform. Iruka continued, looking down at his roster as he began to call the names of the genin hopefuls. With those words, Naruto began to feel despair. Out of all the things he could have asked us to do, why that one? The Bunshin had always been Naruto's worst jutsu. For some reason, no matter how hard he worked at it, he just could not get it down. Naruto watched as the other kids came out, their headbands proudly displayed on their heads. It was nearly enough to make him lose confidence. However, the blonde quickly shored up his determination. He was not going to fail again. He was Uzumaki Naruto, damn it. Uzumaki Naruto, Iruka called out. Naruto grinned, masking his nervousness behind a confident smile as he walked into the other room. Iruka took a seat behind his desk next to Mizuki. All right Naruto, show us what you can do, Iruka said. He was not quite sure what to think about the blonde boy. He had only recently, yesterday, started to try and understand Naruto, after having had a talk with the Hokage after Naruto had done a prank of painting the Hokage monument. The kid in some ways reminded Iruka of himself when he had been an academy student, the pranks, the constantly being loud in order to get attention. In the end, he just decided to silently wish the boy luck. Naruto went through the hand seals required for the jutsu as he began to channel his chakra. Bunshin number Judas, he shouted. A large puff of smoke was created, and when it cleared, everyone's attention was on the clone next to Naruto. The completely dead-looking clone that was laying on the ground and twitching spastically. Several tick marks appeared on Iruka's head as he looked at the clone. You fail. Naruto's eyes widened. He couldn't understand it. He failed. But he had tried so hard, and he really wanted to pee this time. Come on Iruka. I think we can make an exception this time, Mizuki said, surprising Iruka and Naruto. While he did not manage to create a clone, he did try really hard. Iruka sighed, I can't do that. Everyone else in the CL was able to create at least 3 clones. And Naruto only managed to create 1, and look at it, it's pathetic. The Chunin instructor looked at Naruto, I'm sorry Naruto, but I can't PU. Naruto felt his world shatter with those words, he dejectedly walked out of the room and took his seat. As the CL ended and the kids ran up to their parents, showing off their new headbands. Listening with joy as their parents heaped praises on them. One person, however, was not partaking in the joyous atmosphere. Naruto sat over on a small swing set, staring at all of the students and their parents with a look of longing. Having never known his parents, the blonde had often wondered about them. The people at the orphanage had told him they had left, not wanting to be with a monster like him. The old man had told him that his parents had died during the Kyuubi attack and no one knew who they were. Seeing all these kids with their parents hurt, he would never show it and would deny it if anyone mentioned it, but he could not deny to himself how much it hurt. I'm so glad that boy didn't end up graduating. Naruto turned his head slightly as he heard the voice. He had always been blessed with enhanced senses, his hearing, vision and smell were far more formidable than most people. Sometimes that was more of a curse than a blessing. Yeah, I know, could you imagine what would happen if he became a ninja? I mean ease. Shish. You know we're not allowed to talk about that. Naruto frowned as he turned his attention away from the discussion taking place. He had heard many talks of a similar nature with other people whenever they spoke of him and thought he couldn't hear. They would always stop, however, as if they had been about to say something taboo. He wished he knew what they were going to say. Maybe then he would understand why he was so hated. Hey Naruto. Naruto turned around to see Mizuki looking at him. Come with me, I wanted to talk to you. You know, Iruka didn't fail you to mean, Mizuki said as he and Naruto sat on the roof of the academy. He's just worried that you're not going to be ready to face the responsibilities of being a ninja. I know, Naruto sighed dejectedly. But I really wanted to pee this time. An evil of glint came to Mizuki's eyes, but Naruto did not see it. Then I guess I have to tell you. Naruto grinned as he entered the Hokage's office, having sneaked past all of the guards downstairs. It had been notoriously easy for him to do so. In fact, a part of Naruto was surprised by how easy it was, but he just chalked it up to his amazing skills. Now let's see, where is that scroll? Naruto muttered as he looked around. Naruto had been in this office many times in the past, often coming in after a prank or sometimes just to visit the old Hokage. The office was fairly standard, it had a wooden oak desk in front of him that had a window overlooking Konoha behind it. On the left was a couch and behind that were the pictures of the 4 Hokages. On the other side was a bookshelf filled with books and scrolls. Walking over to the shelf, Naruto looked at the scrolls. When he didn't see what he wanted, he frowned. He was about to turn around when his eyes caught sight of the stand right next to the shelf. Because Naruto had only given the room a cursory glance every time he was in here, he had never noticed it. The stand was really just that, a stand made of wood that had a large scroll on it. This has got to be it, Naruto said as he grabbed the scroll. He tied the ends with some ninja wire before strapping it to his back. He was just about to leave when the door opened up and Sarutobi walked in. Naruto, the old Hokage, blinked as he looked at the blonde. What are you doing here? Well, you see, Naruto racked his brain to find a way out of this. In his desperation, he realized there was only one chance. Naruto quickly made a hand sign and called out the only original jutsu he had. Waroke number jutsu. Naruto snickered to himself as he entered the forest. Ha! I showed Oji-san who's boss. With how easy it was for me to knock the old man out, he might as well just make me Hokage. Taking the scroll off his back, Naruto sat down and unrolled it. He looked at the first jutsu and groaned, Kage Bunshin. Not another Bunshin jutsu. The blonde sighed, oh well, might as well get to work. Deciding that it might actually be a good idea to read up on the jutsu in order to help him, Naruto looked over the description of the jutsu first. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu AB ranked Kinjutsu, forbidden jutsu, that can only be used by ninja with higher than normal chakra reserves. This jutsu takes the user's chakra and divides it equally in order to create solid copies of the original. The more chakra the user has, the more clones they can create. Be warned, this jutsu also gives memory feedback every time a clone is dispelled and has been known to kill people who overused it due to this particular trait. Naruto gulped a bit at the knowledge that this had killed someone, though a part of him wondered what it meant by memory feedback. He shook his head. It doesn't matter if this killed someone. I'm Uzumaki Naruto and I'm going to master this. Determination renewed, Naruto stood up and began getting to work. With a jutsu this powerful, he would be Hokage in no time. Less than an hour later, Naruto found himself staring at 10 more copies of himself. The jutsu had been surprisingly easy. Blinking a few times, he reached out with a finger and poked one of them. Stop. That tickles, his clone said as he swatted the hand away. Naruto blinked again before a large grin spread across his face. Yada. I did it. Naruto shouted as he pumped a fist in the air. Yada. All of his clones shouted, emulating his actions. Naruto dispelled the clones since he didn't need them. However, when he did, Naruto found himself getting the images of himself and his clones from 10 other perspectives. What the hell? Was that what the scroll was talking about when it said memory whatever? Naruto asked himself. He shrugged. In the end, all that mattered to him was that he had mastered the jutsu. He was just about to go over some more jutsu from the scroll when a familiar voice yelled at him. There you are. Naruto looked up and saw Iruka stomping up to him. The blonde grinned as he jumped up and pointed a finger at him. Ha! Found you, Iruka-sensei. Baka. Iruka shouted as he stopped in front of his blonde student. I found you. Hehe, I guess you did, sensei. Naruto replied as he rubbed the back of his neck. You were pretty fast. I only had time to learn one jutsu. Iruka started as he looked around at the ruined clearing. He has been training hard, I can tell. Naruto jumped on the balls of his feet as he spoke to his sensei in an excited manner. Hey, but listen, Iruka, now that you're here, I can show you this totally awesome jutsu and you can let me graduate. That's how it all works out, right? Iruka, who was just about to go back to scolding Naruto, blinked. What? Graduate? Naruto nodded. Yeah, that's how it works, right? I learn a jutsu from this scroll and you let me graduate. Iruka looked at Naruto cautiously. While he did certainly look like he had been training, Iruka had no idea where Naruto had gotten this idea for graduating this way. Naruto, who told you, you can graduate this way? Iruka asked. Naruto tilted his head to the side. Mizuki-sensei did. He told me where to find this scroll and about this place. Iruka's eyes widened as he realized what was going on. He was just about to say something when he heard a whizzing sound and shoved Naruto away. Get down. Several kunai came out of the trees and impaled Iruka in the leg and arms. The Chunin instructor looked up and scowled. I see, so that's how it is. Wow, you got here pretty fast. Naruto, who had been staring at Iruka in shock, looked up to see Mizuki with a large grin on his face. Mizuki-sensei, what's going on here? Why are you attacking Iruka-sensei? Naruto mumbled. Hearing his voice, the two Chunin turned their attention to Naruto. Give me the scroll, Naruto, Mizuki commanded, holding out his hand. No, Naruto, don't give it to him. Iruka shouted. What's going on? Naruto asked, unsure what he should do. Mizuki used you to get the scroll. Iruka said. That scroll contains Konoha's secret and forbidden jutsu. He lied to you so you would do his bidding. Oh, I'll tell you who's lying, Naruto, Mizuki said with a smirk. Iruka looked over at Mizuki and saw the smirk on his face. It was then he realized what the white-haired traitor was going to say and his eyes widened. No, Mizuki, don't say it. You know it's forbidden. Naruto looked back and forth between his two senseis in confusion. What do you mean? Who's lying? They've been lying to you your whole life. Ever since the degree of 12 years ago, Mizuki looked at Naruto with an insane grin. 12 years ago? Naruto shook his head. I don't understand. No. Mizuki don't. Haven't you ever wondered why were you hated? Mizuki questioned, making the blonde's eyes widen. Why you were ignored? Why people treated you like you were worthless? Like less than dirt. Mizuki, stop it now. Iruka shouted to no avail. I'll tell you why, Naruto. Mizuki sneered. You see, what they don't want you to know was that the Yondaime did not actually kill the Kyuubi. Instead, he sealed it away inside of a newborn baby. Naruto began to tremble. While he never paid attention and didn't like to study, he had never been dumb. Stupid. Maybe a little. But living on his own since he was 5 had forced him to develop a little faster than most. No, he was not the brightest person, but he did have a decent amount of common sense and a keen ability to read others, something that had helped him immensely in the past when he had run into several drunken villagers. He knew that Mizuki was telling him this for a reason, that the child who the Kyuubi was sealed into and he were in some way tied. Mizuki confirmed his theory a few seconds later. You are the child he sealed the Kyuubi into. You are the nine-tailed fox. Naruto slumped to his knees. Everything made sense to him now. The glares, the hatred, the people muttering behind his back, telling their children to stay away from him. A part of him was actually angry that he had not realized this. His birthday was the day of the Kyuubi's defeat. People hated him with a pion. The one time he went out during the Kyuubi festival because he wanted to celebrate his birthday, he had been beaten by a group of drunken villagers. All of it made sense. So I'm a demon then. Naruto was so caught up in his turmoil that he did not even see the giant Fuma shuriken heading his way. A second later, Naruto found himself staring into Iruka's tear-streaked face. He looked over to see a giant shuriken sticking out of his sensei's back. Why? Naruto asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Because we're the same, Iruka said with guilt lacing his words. I was just like you. Back when I was in the academy, I was so lonely, so I played the fool. I know what it's like to feel that kind of pain. It hurts, doesn't it? I'm so sorry, Naruto. I should have done more to help you. Ha 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 ha. Mizuki laughed behind them. That's a good one, Iruka. But we both know you hate him more than anyone. After all, it was the demon who took your parents away. Naruto's eyes widened when he heard that. Naruto did the only thing he could do given what he was being told. He grabbed the scroll and ran. Naruto. Iruka's voice sounded after him. Naruto continued jumping through the trees as fast as he could to get away from the two Chunin. Naruto. Turning around, the blonde saw Iruka coming towards him. Naruto. Mizuki was lying. He was just saying that stuff to confuse you. The Chunin Academy teacher held out his hand. Give me the scroll so we can keep Mizuki from getting it. However, Naruto merely spun around and launched himself back at Iruka, smashing his head into the Chunin's gut. The two tumbled down the trees and onto the ground. How? Iruka questioned as he held onto his stomach. How did you know? There was a puff of smoke. That I wasn't Iruka? Asked the Mizuki. Naruto smirked. Because there was a puff of smoke. When it cleared, it revealed Iruka. I'm Iruka. Mizuki scowled. Why are you protecting that demon anyways? You know what he'll do now that he has his hands on the scroll. Naruto is just like me. He'll use the power that's inside the scroll to destroy Konoha. That's what demons are like. You're right, said Iruka, surprising Mizuki. That is what a demon would do. Naruto, who had taken to hiding behind a tree as he listened in, froze at those words. I see, he thought sadly. So Iruka only sees me as a demon too. But that's not what Naruto would do. Iruka's words caused Naruto and Mizuki to snap their attention back to him. Naruto is not the demon. He's my student and a proud ninja of Konoha. Sure, he may not always get things right and he's a little, well, he's really clumsy and doesn't act all that smart. But he's nothing like you. Naruto is a one in a million kind of person and I believe in him. Naruto went from depressed to elated. Iruka believed in him. For as long as he could remember, only the old man and a nice father-daughter couple at Ichiraku Ramen believed in him. Having another person who believed he could succeed was an elating feeling. You know, Aruka, I was going to save you for later, but I've changed my mind. Mizuki sneered as he began spinning his shuriken on his arm as he got ready to launch it. Die. Just as Mizuki got ready to throw his Fuma shuriken at the Aruka, a blonde and orange streak crashed into him, launching a foot into his face. The Chunin traitor scowled as he landed several feet back, glaring at the person who had hit him. If you lay one hand on my sensei, I'll kill you. Naruto declared, giving his opponent a defiant glare. Ha, I'd like to see you try, demon. Mizuki shouted with an insane grin. Naruto put his hands in a ram seal and began aiming his chakra for another jutsu that he had seen in the scroll. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Both Aruka and Mizuki gaped as hundreds if not thousands of Narutos appeared within the forest. They were everywhere, a literal sea of orange that almost blocked out all of the green of the forest. What's wrong, Mizuki Tem? I thought you were going to kick my. One of the clones shouted. Another cracked his knuckles. Well, if you're not coming to us, I guess we'll just go to you. The clones all jumped up and headed towards the terrified traitor. Naruto grinned as he looked down at the M of black and blue flesh that had at one point been Mizuki. Hee, maybe I went a little too hard on him, the blonde said with a sheepish grin. Unbelievable, Aruka thought in awe. To be able to have learned such a powerful jutsu in less than an hour, and the number of clones. He said that he wanted to usurp the Hokages, and I'm beginning to believe he just might do it. Naruto, Aruka said, getting the blonde's attention. Come here, I have something I want to give you. Naruto blinked before walking over to him. What's up, sensei? Close your eyes for a moment, Aruka said. Naruto did so, and as he did felt a weight being removed from his head before a new one took its place. Okay, you can open them now. Naruto did so, and his hand went to his head, feeling the cold metal and notched grooves of a Konoha headband. Aruka had his goggles in his hand. Congratulations. You graduate, Aruka said with pride. And to celebrate, we're going out for ramen tonight. Naruto smiled and was hard-pressed not to cry. He decided to hide his tears by jumping on Aruka in a hug. Aruka-sensei. Oh wow. Naruto, that hurts. Aruka said, though he was pleased to see the boy so excited. Thank you, Aruka-kun. You may leave for now, Sarutobi said as Aruka escorted Naruto to his office. It was late and Aruka and Naruto had just gone out for some ramen after a clone had given Sarutobi the forbidden scroll. However, he had wanted to talk to Naruto and make sure he was alright. Sure, Hokage-sama, Aruka said, I'll see you in a week, Naruto. As Aruka closed the door behind him, Sarutobi turned to look at Naruto. Naruto, Sarutobi started, only to stop as Naruto launched himself at him, grabbing onto the old Hokage as he cried. Sarutobi was actually surprised. In all his years of knowing the blonde, he had only ever seen him cry once. The one time he had gone out to the Kyuubi festival and gotten beaten by a group of drunk villagers. I guess what he learned today was too much for him to take, Sarutobi thought as he wrapped Naruto in a hug. Sorry, Gigi, Naruto said with a small hiccup. For what? Sarutobi asked, amused. The scroll his back, you helped me root out a traitor and just became a genin. I got your robes wet, Naruto pointed at the small wet spot from his crying. The Sandaime looked down to see that his robes were indeed wet from Naruto's tears. Sarutobi held in a snort of amusement. Of all the things Naruto could be sorry for, it was for getting his robes wet. Gigi, Naruto said in an abnormally quiet voice. Is it true? What Mizuki said. Sarutobi sighed. He had known this was coming at some point and had hoped to have some time to prepare for it. It is. So I am a demon, Naruto said, looking down at the ground, tears forming in his eyes. Sarutobi grabbed Naruto by the shoulders, making the blonde look up at him. Naruto, I want you to listen carefully. You are not a demon. When the Yondaime sealed the Kyuubi into you, he had made it his dying wish for you to be seen as a hero. A hero? Naruto questioned, getting a nod from Sarutobi. Why? Because Naruto, it is only thanks to you that the Kyuubi is safely locked away. You are the entire reason that Konoha is still standing today, Sarutobi said. Really? Naruto asked, his voice a little hopeful. Yes, Sarutobi said, you are the hero of Konoha. Then, how come everyone hates me? The blonde asked. Sarutobi sighed. They don't hate you, Naruto, they just don't understand. Sealing, or Fuinjutsu as it's called, is one of the most obscure ninja arts there is, and the hardest to master. Very few people understand this, and so when something like a demon gets sealed into somebody, they are unsure whether the seal can really hold something like that, a being of such power in. You have to understand that when the Kyuubi attacked, many good ninja died that day, and because of that they are unwilling to accept you, fearing that you are really just the Kyuubi in human form. Naruto frowned. That made sense, in some sick and twisted way. But now that he knew why he was hated, he had to wonder what he should do. Would people be able to accept him? Could he get people to see past the Kyuubi and look at him as Naruto? At the moment it didn't seem all that likely. After all, the people of Konoha had 12 years to get over their loss and see Naruto for himself. Then again he had not really helped in that regard. He had been so desperate for attention that he had turned to pranks, since even bad attention was better than no attention. But maybe if I show them that how good a ninja I am, and that I'm willing to protect the village, maybe I can change their minds. Naruto thought to himself. He looked up at Sarutobi with determination. I'll show them that I'm not the Kyuubi, that I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Future Hokage of Konoha. I won't let this get to me, ever. Datbeo. Sarutobi smiled at seeing the boys will of fire returning. That's good, Naruto-kun. I have no doubt you will eventually get there. However, it will require a lot more hard work than what you are used to. You won't be able to do your pranks anymore and will have to actually take the time to learn about being a shinobi. After all, a Hokage is not just the most powerful ninja in the village, he is the smartest and most cunning as well. So then you're pretty smart, Oja-san. Naruto said. Sarutobi chuckled a bit. Naruto-kun, do you know why I earned my nickname of Professor? Naruto scratched the back of his head. Because you're smart. Well, essentially yes, Sarutobi admitted. However, it is much more than that. I earned the title of professor because of my ability to read people and react to any given situation both on and off the battlefield. In the many years that I have lived, I have amassed much knowledge from reading books. Things that taught me about shinobi basics, to the more advanced ninja abilities and theories, as well as knowledge on civilian practices like politics, which has become essential for every Hokage to know now. He took a minute to curse the Nadime's decision to create the council, the whole reason a Hokage needed to know politics. He had been told by his sensei, Senju Tobarima, before the Second Shinobi War started that he was 100% positive he had been drunk when he came up with the idea. It looked good on paper, having a group of people dedicated to helping the Hokage deal with the everyday affairs of Konoha's civilians. However, the reality was far different. Sarutobi had spent more time fighting with the council than anything, and many of the people in it, especially on the civilian side, were extraordinarily greedy, always wanting more money and to line their pockets with more coin. The old Hokage shook his head and banished the thought. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that to be a good shinobi requires you to be not just strong, but also smart. I guess that makes sense. Naruto tilted his head for a moment before remembering something. Oh yeah, speaking of being strong, you know that awesome jutsu I learned. The Kage Bunshin. Yes, I know it, Sarutobi said, wondering where the blonde was going with this. Yeah, well, I was reading the description of it, and I was hoping you could help me figure out something I read in it. The scroll said something about memory feedback, and that it was really dangerous for some reason. But, I don't even know what that is. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Sarutobi looked at Naruto as he used his cunning mind, the mind that had given him his title of professor to come up with a plan that should help the blonde get stronger without really helping him formed in his mind. Memory feedback is the memories of the clone's life returning to the user, Sarutobi answered. Whenever a clone is dispelled, whether on purpose, by accident or running out of chakra, all of its memories are given to the person who created them. Like when I created those 10 in the forest and saw 10 different sides of myself and my clones, Naruto mumbled to himself though Sarutobi still heard it. Yes, the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu is a powerful technique that way, Sarutobi said. Naruto looked up and tilted his head in curiosity. How so? Sarutobi tapped his chin. Well, originally the clones were created because they were the perfect spying tools. You could have one of your clones infiltrate a base without any danger to the original, and when they dispelled, they would give a complete layout of the base. So it's used to memorize things? Asked Naruto, scratching the back of his head. Sarutobi nodded. Yes. However, the Kage Bunshin can be used for more than just memorization, Naruto-kun. In fact, that jutsu is an excellent method to learn new things with. You can learn just about anything from your clones, from chakra control and jutsu, to the books you read, writing, and even taijutsu, since muscle memory is a mental faculty. That sounds almost like it can be used for training. Naruto exclaimed, excited by the prospect of what he could get his clones to do. The old Hokage nodded. It can indeed be used for training. Though I suspect that only you will be able to use this jutsu to its full potential. Why is that? Asked Naruto, excited at the prospect that there was something only he could do. Because you're the only one who has enough chakra to summon enough clones to really make the training worth it. Most ninja, even Jonin, can only make 5, maybe 10 clones if they're lucky, Sarutobi answered. Ha, I made nearly 1,000 in the clearing when I beat the crap out of Mizuki Tem. Naruto said. That you did? Sarutobi chuckled at the boy's enthusiasm, but it will take more than spamming out clones to become a great ninja. You will have to train hard and actually be serious about your profession. Naruto thumped his chest. Don't you worry, old man. I'll train harder than everybody in Konoha. I'll become not only the most powerful Hokage ever, but the strongest shinobi in the elemental nations. That's my promise of a lifetime. Datbio. I'm sure you will, Naruto, Sarutobi chuckled. And to help, I have some advice for you. But before I tell you what it is, I want you to promise me you will listen to everything I have to say and follow the advice I give you to the letter. Naruto grinned as he thumped his chest. Don't worry, Oji-san, I promise on my honor as the future Hokage of Konoha that I will listen to what you have to say and follow your advice. Datbio. Sarutobi smiled before he began. Very well then. Now since you are a shinobi, you will have access to the ninja section of the library. There you will find scrolls on chakra theory and control, ninja basics, and I think they even have a few books on Fuinjutsu if you're interested. Though I would also suggest reading books on things like politics and other civilian practices. If you're going to be Hokage, you will need to know these things. I want you to start off by finding books on basic chakra control and theory, as well as a taijutsu style that will suit you if the basic style does not. I know you do not want to hear this, but the basic principles are the most important aspects of being a shinobi. Without them you cannot grow because you do not have the essential steps necessary to advance in skill. Sarutobi looked at Naruto. Promise me you will do this. Naruto nodded, for once actually paying attention to what he was being told. You got it, Oji-san. I promise. First thing tomorrow morning I will go to the library and look up that information. Naruto frowned for a moment. Though, I don't know if they'll let me in. Sarutobi frowned. He knew that a lot of places did allow Naruto entrance, like many of the shops and restaurants. Thankfully, the library, unlike the shops and restaurants, was government-owned, meaning he was the only one who could bar someone entrance. If they try to bar you entrance, just tell them barring entrance to a shinobi is illegal and that if they try they can take it up with me. Also, might I suggest some new clothes? New clothes? What's wrong with these clothes? Asked Naruto. He liked these clothes. They were orange, and warm, and comfortable, and orange. Naruto, I know you like the color orange, however it is not a good color for a shinobi. Sarutobi said. When you are out on a mission, those clothes will stick out like a sore thumb, and a ninja is supposed to blend in. Deciding to add some incentive, Sarutobi added another thing. Besides, if you wear clothes that are more shinobi-like, it will add a powerful and mysterious image to you, making people recognize how powerful of a ninja you are. That seemed to get Naruto hooked. I'll do it, Oji-san. He frowned for a moment as he remembered when he had tried buying other clothes a few times, however he had always been kicked out of the stores before he could even take a look at the clothing selection. Good. Sarutobi smiled. Now you have a whole week to get stronger before you get your Jonin-sensei ignited. The Sandaime said, I suggest you use this time to catch up with the rest of your CL. With Kage Bushins you should be able to get a decent level of knowledge and learn the basics. Though you will have to do physical exercise yourself, since clones can't do that for you. Naruto blinked. Why not? Because a clone is merely a chakra construct. It's not your real body, therefore it can't help you grow physically, Sarutobi answered. Now it's getting late, so why don't you get to bed? That way you can start getting stronger early tomorrow. Right. Naruto shouted enthusiastically. I'll see you later, Gigi. Sarutobi watched as Nato left. With the knowledge of that jutsu he should be able to grow strong. Sarutobi looked at a picture of Minato. Your son is on the path to being a great shinobi, Minato. The next morning Naruto woke up early feeling fresh as a daisy, despite having been up late last night helping deal with a traitor and the shocking revelations that followed. He stood up and stretched out, working out some of the kinks he had gotten from the night before, and after that he started to get ready for the day, getting showered, getting dressed, eating his ramen and then heading for the library. As he walked down the street Naruto ignored the glares and mutterings sent his way. While they still kind of bothered him, he refused to let it get to him in any way. Now that he knew why he was hated, he was more determined to make them see that he wasn't some demon. That he was a proud shinobi of Konoha. He would start by following his grandfather figure's advice and start getting stronger and smarter. Hence the reason he was heading to the library to study. He didn't much like the idea of studying, but he had promised Sarutobi as a future Hokage, so he had to go through with it. And if there was one thing Naruto would never do, it was going back on his word. Who knows, maybe it would actually help. Naruto entered the library and looked around, feeling his eyes widen at the sight before him. He had never been to the library before and was amazed at how large the place was. There were about 4 stories in the library altogether, and all along the walls and in aisles going down the library were books, loads and loads of books. It was giving him a headache just looking at them. Just as Naruto was about to make his way towards the ninja section of the library, he was stopped by the custodian. I am going to have to ask you to leave, boy, the custodian, a woman who looked to be in her mid-50s said, spitting out the word boy with venom. Naruto's first desire was to jump at the woman and start yelling about how she couldn't kick him out. However, he had promised Oji-san that he would be an amazing ninja, and ninja were mature and did not lose their emotions over something as simple as this. Instead, he merely looked at the woman calmly as he spoke. Listen, lady, I happen to be a shinobi of Konoha, and it's illegal to bar me entrance into the library. To emphasize his point, Naruto pointed to his headband, making the woman pale a bit. Of course, if you feel this is still a problem, I am sure that I could escort you to see Hokage Oj-sama and we can work it out with him. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. He had almost called the Hokage Oji-san, but that would not sound good if he called the Hokage that right now. After all, most people could never get away with calling the most powerful ninja in the village an old man. The woman took a step back in shock for a second, unsure what to do in this situation. The boy had never actually come to the library before, so this had not really been a pressing issue. However, like people who worked at other places, she did not want the demon to be in her presence, or in the vicinity of stores of knowledge that could potentially help it shed its human flesh. She soon realized, however, there was nothing she could do. It was well known that the Hokage was quite partial with the boy, and would favor him over her. Scowling, she turned around and left, but not before giving him some advice. Fine, you can stay, though I suggest you take care when reading, child. Should any of these books be out of place or damaged in any way, I'm holding you responsible. Naruto snorted as the woman walked off. Seriously, did she think someone like her could scare the great Uzumaki Naruto with such a lame threat? Shaking his head now that the crisis was averted, Naruto made his way to the shinobi section of the library. He put his hands in a ram seal and created 5 cage buncheons. Alright, I want you guys to grab some books and check them out. Anything you can find on chakra, seals, taijutsu and basic shinobi skills will be fine. Also, find a book on politics, whatever that is. Jizen said it was important for a Hokage to know, so I need to know it. Bring them back home and start reading them. Wait, what will you be doing? Asked one of the clones, angry that his creator was shoving off his reading on them. I'm going to go shopping, Naruto said. He hated that he was going to get new clothes, but again, he had promised Oji-san that he would get new clothes, and the man had made a point. After all, he wanted people to take him seriously, and if this would help, then so be it. After all, if I want to be a good shinobi, I have to look cool too. Naruto sighed as he was kicked out of another store. Walking off, Naruto tried to think of a way to get into a store. Unlike the library, which was owned by the government, aka the Hokage, the stores were all civilian owned, so they could kick him out if they did not want to do business with him. Which basically meant every store he had gone to had kicked him out, not wanting to sell anything to the Kyuubi brat. Looking around, the blonde found a store that looked fairly nondescript. The only sign that told him it was for shinobi was the rather large kunai symbol above the door and the sign that read, Higurashi Weapon Shop. Deciding to give this place a try, Naruto walked in. Looking around, the first thing Naruto noticed was that whoever owned this place had an obvious love for weapons. There were racks upon racks of weapons lining the entire shop. Swords, staffs, scythes, it seemed that anything anyone could name was there. He had never seen so many different weapons in one place ever, and some of these weapons he had never seen at all. It was enough to make even someone like Naruto, who knew next to nothing about weapons, drool. Can I help you? Naruto stiffened and almost shouted as he spun around. Behind him was a young girl that was maybe a year older than him, wearing a Chinese-style pink tank top, dark green cargo pants, and had her hair done up in 2 buns. To Naruto they made her kind of look like a panda. Or a mouse. Naruto did his best not to snicker at the thought. Hello. Naruto blinked as the girl waved a hand in front of his face. What? Naruto said, blushing in embarrassment as he took a step back and put a hand behind his head. The girl just looked at him before she rolled her eyes at the kid's inattentiveness and shrugged. I was asking if you needed help finding anything. Naruto blinked in surprise. You work here? That's right. The girl said. My name is Higurashi Tenten. My father owns this store, so I come in and help when I'm not on missions. You're a ninja then? Naruto asked curiously. Yep. I've been a ninja for about a year now, Tenten replied. That's awesome, Naruto stated with a large grin. I just graduated. He blinked as he remembered why he was here. You know you can help me. I was looking into getting some new clothes. I can see why, Tenten said with an amused smirk. Your clothes are hideous. Hey, Naruto said, feeling the need to defend his clothes. These clothes are warm and comfortable and ugly, Tenten finished with a grin. Seriously, who wears orange? I like orange, Naruto shouted indignantly. Seriously, what was it with people continuing to diss on the color orange? It was the best color in the world. It's my favorite color. Even so, it's not a very good color for a ninja. Tenten replied, finding the boy's defensiveness amusing. Especially when it's so bright. Naruto clenched his fists a bit as he resisted the urge to yell. Remember your promise to Oji-san. Naruto had to remind himself. You promised to act like a real shinobi, and real shinobi do not get upset over things like this. Damn him for making me promise this. He's so lucky I promised not to do any more pranks or I would be pranking his into next week. He took a deep breath before letting it out. Feeling a little more in control, Naruto looked back at Tenten. Look, can you help me with my clothes or not? Naruto asked when he felt he had calmed down sufficiently. Sure, Tenten replied, amused by Naruto's reaction. She took him over to the clothing section of the store. So what are you looking for exactly? She asked. Naruto thought about what he wanted to look like. He needed something that made him look cool and added a mysterious persona to him. Something that screamed powerful and awesome. Something. I'm not sure, he said sheepishly. I've never really shopped for clothes before, so. He had actually tried clothes shopping once when he was 6 and had just gotten an apartment. However, the store owners had kicked him out before he could actually shop. That had actually been the same day he found his jumpsuits in the trash after the same store he tried to shop from had thrown them away. You're kidding, right? Tenten looked at him incredulously. When he shook his head, she sighed. Then it looks like we're just going to have to see what works. She pulled him over to the clothing section of the store, where she began grabbing different styles of clothes and then making him change into many styles she gave him, essentially turning him into a life-sized dress-up doll. Eventually she found a style that fit. Now Naruto was wearing dark black shinobi pants that tucked into a pair of black steel-toed combat boots instead of shinobi sandals. He had a black sleeveless Chinese-style shirt like hers but with a dark orange trim. She had tried to talk him out of wearing any orange but was unsuccessful in getting the blonde to completely rid himself of his favorite color. At least there was less orange than before and it was in a darker tone than his jumpsuit had been. His hands were covered in fingerless gloves that had metal knuckles that he could channel chakra through to increase the damage done. His arms were also covered in black bandages up to his biceps. Over this Tenten threw on a black cloak that covered his form down to the ankles. Lastly she changed the strap to his headband, giving it a long black fabric that went down to his knees. There, you look much better now, Tenten said, smiling at him. Indeed he did look much better. Now that she was seeing him without all the orange he actually looked cute. Now you like a real shinobi. You think so? Naruto blushed as he scratched the back of his head. Of course. So will that be all? Tenten asked. Yes, Naruto paused for a moment and his eyes glazed over as the memories of one of his clones hit him. Hello, anybody home? Tenten asked at seeing the blonde space out again. This kid is so weird. Actually I do need some more things, Naruto said, turning his attention back to Tenten who was looking at him with her head tilted. First, do you have any training weights I can buy? Of course, Tenten said, leading Naruto over to one section of the store. She went up to a shelf and grabbed a box. This has a 2-pair set of training weights, one for the arms and one for the legs. To change their weight you just channel chakra into them and to release the weights you just hold your hand in the release seal and say, Kai. Naruto nodded at the explanation as he grabbed the box in her hand. Next up I need a standard set of kunai, shuriken, explosive notes, smoke bombs, and ninja wire, flash tags, a ceiling scroll to put it all in and, Naruto closed his eyes as the information of another clone hit him. This was going to take some getting used to. And a bow staff. A bow staff, huh? Well, you're in luck because we have all of those things. Tenten said, once more leading him around the store. Now then, what kind of staff are you looking for? She asked as she grabbed some of the other equipment he had asked for. Naruto blinked as he went through the information of his clone. It needs to be made of a light material, but have heavier ends for added force. If I can get something that has studs or some kind of protrusions to do more damage, that would be awesome too. And I want to be able to channel chakra through it. Wow, that's quite a detailed item you want. Ga, kya. Both Naruto and Tenten yelled as they spun around. Naruto found himself staring at a bull of man. Large and built like brick shit house. The man had muscles on every part of his body that Naruto could see. He even had muscles on his muscles. He had brown hair and brown eyes much like Tenten. He was wearing an off-white shirt, brown pants and a pair of brown boots. Damn it too, San. Tenten shouted as she clutched a hand to her chest. How many times have I told you not to sneak up on me? And especially when I'm with a customer. Tenten's dad merely laughed. Aw, take it easy, Tenten. Beside, aren't you ninja supposed to be more aware of your surroundings? Do you want to be used as target practice again? Tenten asked with a maniacal gleam in her eyes and had one of her hands inside her kunai pouch. Her dad merely sweat dropped before he coughed and turned his attention to Naruto. So I heard what you want. That's a pretty descriptive weapon. You're fortunate that I have just the thing. Naruto watched with a mixture of shock and weariness as the man led him and Tenten to the back room, which turned out to be a forge. Getting a ladder, the large man positioned it above a shelf and climbed up. Not finding what he was looking for, he got off and repeating this process several more times. I know I put it somewhere, but where? Aha. Here we are. The man said as he came back down the ladder with a large object that was wrapped in cloth. This was actually custom made for someone else, but well, he had died before I could give it to him. Since it's just been collecting dust over the years, I figured I may as well get rid of it. Naruto and Tenten followed the large man back to the front where he rang Naruto up. Now all that stuff you got there will come to around 10,000 yen, Tenten's dad said. Naruto cringed a bit but got out the necessary money. It would put him back by a lot, especially since he would no longer be able to gain a stipend from the Hokage since he was a ninja. That meant he would have to find some other way to get food, so he could use the money he had left to pay for utilities. I think you missed the staff, sir, Naruto said as he realized that the staff should be a lot more expensive than all of his other stuff combined. Nah, it's good, the man gave a dismissive wave of his hand. You can have it to commemorate your first time shopping here. Tenten gasped. Her father had never given anything away, ever. Yet he had just given what Tenten could tell was one of her father's finest pieces of work, and to someone he just met. Naruto was even more shocked. This man had to know about his status as the Kyuubi container. There was no possible explanation for him not to know. Oji-san had told him that everyone who was old enough to remember that night knew of his status. Yet here he was giving him something that looked like it had taken more time and effort to make than all the time and effort that Naruto had put into all of his pranks combined. Why? Naruto asked in an uncharacteristically quiet voice. You know who I am. Both Tenten and her dad saw Naruto's hand unconsciously go to his stomach. One looked at him with understanding while the other was just confused. Because I'm not like most of the fools in this village, kid, the brown-haired man smirked at the blonde. Besides, it's not like I'm giving this away for free. Naruto looked up at him. I expect you to come here for all your shinobi needs. Naruto looked at the man with shock. He realized that this man was also someone he could count on to see him for who he was and not what he held. He gave the two there one of his most brilliant smiles. Thanks, Mr. Kato, the man replied. Thanks, Kato-san. Naruto bowed before grabbing his equipment and running off with a grin. I'll make sure this staff becomes famous when I'm Hokage. He yelled out as he left. Tenten looked over at her father in undisguised curiosity. What was that about? She asked. Nothing that concerns you for now, Tenten, Kato replied as he looked at where the blonde left. Minato, Kushina, I hope that this will help your legacy grow, it's all I can do for him. The next day found Naruto in a training field working on several different shinobi aspects. He had summoned around 100 clones to help him and had them divided into groups of 25. The first group was working on chakra control. From what Naruto's clones had read yesterday, the whole reason he could not do a standard bunshin was because he had extremely large reserves and next to no control. At least, that was the theory he had come up with from what he read. So he would need to fix that by getting better control. Right now they were working on the leaf floating exercise, the first and most basic exercise. It was basically floating a leaf over the palm of their hands and making it spin. It was just in one hand at the moment, but Naruto eventually planned on increasing the amount of leaves that he could spin, figuring that the more leaves he could float at the same time, the better his control would be. It was not in the scroll he had read, but Naruto had always been innovative when coming up with pranks, and that ability was easily carried on into other aspects of his life and career if he actually set his mind to it. He wanted to at some point be able to spin a leaf on each finger at the same time, rather than using his palms before he moved on to tree climbing, which was the next exercise he saw when he had skipped to the intermediate chakra control book, just to see what it held of course. Another group of clones was working on his taijutsu. In the academy he had been told the wrong stances by Mizuki Tem, who had been in charge of the taijutsu lessons, and so he really had no style, fighting more like a brawler than anything. He had originally grabbed a scroll on the basic academy taijutsu style. However, he soon found that even with how simple they were, the style simply didn't fit him for some reason. It was odd because he had only started working on it today. But for some reason it felt wrong, was the best way he could describe it. Like his body type just didn't have what the style called for, or maybe that his mindset did not work for it. Whatever the case, the style did not work and he had to find another one. Thankfully, his clones had found several other styles that they felt would be useful. He planned to learn them all so that he could find out which style would work best and eventually combine the styles into something that he could call his own style, which would be totally awesome, and then he could shove it in Sasuke Tem's face that he had created his own style. One of the things he had read, his clones had read, that lead to his decision to eventually create his own style was the knowledge that most shinobi stick with one style that suited them, and only one style. But Naruto had read from one of the basic scrolls that certain styles worked better against other styles, like the Uchiha clan's fighting style worked well against most styles but was particularly good against styles that relied on taijutsu techniques that they could copy and use against their opponents. But it was susceptible to styles that relied on being faster than your opponent, and styles that relied on unpredictable and untelegraphed movement. He figured that with the Kage Bushin he could learn them all, even if he was not proficient with them, and turn them into something better. Right now he was learning a style called Muay Thai, a style that relied on stand-up striking along with various clincher techniques. The taijutsu was also known as the art of 8 limbs, because it relied on punches, kicks, knee strikes and elbow strikes rather than just fist and feet. So far this style was the one he was most comfortable with, since it was a more of a straightforward style and Naruto was always a bit of a brawler. Once he got this style down he would start building his own around this one once he started adding other styles to it. Another group was working with his new staff. He had found an old Bujutsu scroll and had decided that a good weapon would help him get stronger. He had decided on the staff because of his admittedly short reach, something he hoped to rectify soon. Like his taijutsu clones, they were going through the style katas slowly at the moment, making sure that the muscle memory would be engraved in their minds for when they transferred. There was only really one problem with using Kage Bushin to train in a physical activity like taijutsu and weapons training. They could learn the katas of a style due to the fact that muscle memory was a mental faculty, but without a proper sparring partner it would only do so much. He could completely master all of the katas in a style, yet even then, if he were faced with an opponent with more experience than him, he would lose. Still, at the very least this would mean that he could make his taijutsu as impeccable as possible before he found a sparring partner to really get better. His last group was divided into two. One group was reading, most of it was on chakra theory, the use of hand seals, trap making, fuinjutsu and various other shinobi aspects. All of them were beginner books written to teach the basics. The other group was working his calligraphy. Naruto had decided that he was going to be better than all the Hokages, and had figured that usurping the Yondaime in what he was best known for would be the best way to show how awesome he really was. The first thing Naruto had learned about the complex art of sealing was that it required a steady hand, and absolutely perfect brush strokes. One wrong mark on a seal and the results could be explosive. This meant he had to work on his calligraphy, because even if he did not want to admit it, his handwriting ed. So Naruto had been forced to delegate a group of clones to getting better handwriting. It was a basic skill he needed to learn, and while at ed, he remembered Sarutobi's advice about basics being the fundamental stepping stone into more advanced stuff. At least he was pretty sure that was what he had said. The man had talked so much when he had been giving advice that Naruto was not sure he got it all. Meanwhile, Naruto himself worked on the physical aspects of his training. He would start off with laps around the training field he had chosen, Training Ground 43, a training ground right next to the Forest of Death, not that he knew that, since it was completely secluded. He was currently doing 20 laps around the training ground, with his added weights which were at 20 pounds for his wrist bracers, and 30 pounds for his legs, even he got tired. He planned on increasing the amount of laps he could do within 1 hour to increase his speed. He also did 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, 50 pull-ups on one of the trees, 100 squats, 100 log punches with each fist and 100 kicks with each leg. And that was his morning routine. Naruto found himself laying on the ground as he panted, exhaustion actually setting in. It was an odd feeling, he reflected. Naruto had never really felt tired before, something he was beginning to suspect he got from the Kyuubi. Oh sure, sometimes he could get sleepy but never from lack of energy. Right now he was really exhausted. With a sigh, Naruto sat up. He was done with his morning workout, but he still had half a day left. Turning to his clones, Naruto gave the order to dispel. Unfortunately, they all decided to dispel at once. Even with his enhanced healing factor, Naruto could not withstand 100 clones dispelling at the same time, which, when combined with his exhaustion from his new morning routine, ended up knocking the blonde unconscious. It was nearly an hour later when Naruto woke up, looking at the sky and sighing in relief as he realized not much time had passed. Promising himself to make his clones dispel in groups to avoid the MIV headache next time, Naruto stood up and made a few more clones. Go hunting and see if you can find something to eat, Naruto said. He was getting hungry and needed some food. With his money nearly gone from clothes shopping, Naruto did not want to waste it trying to get a decent meal. While his clones did that, Naruto set about to making a fire pit, digging out a small ditch before collecting rocks and putting them in a circle around it. He gathered some dried wood and put the pieces in the middle of the pit. With that done, Naruto went through a few hand seals and used a small Kaden, fire release, jutsu he knew. It was a fairly basic jutsu that was ridiculously easy to learn, and he had only learned it because of its use in starting a fire for occasions like this. The jutsu was also easy, requiring very little control to create, and one did not need an affinity for fire to use it, meaning that anyone who had the ability to channel chakra could learn it. Hey boss. Naruto turned to see his clones. The one in the middle, who had spoken, was carrying several fish they had managed to catch. Good job, Naruto said, feeling a little awkward at knowing he was essentially complimenting himself. Go ahead and dispel yourselves. The clones nodded and dispelled as Naruto set about to cooking his meal. After lunch, Naruto created another batch of 100 clones and had them restart everything they had previously been doing. Meanwhile, Naruto attempted to meditate. In the book on the basics of chakra theory, he had read that by meditating a ninja could sharpen their senses, as well as their mind, and familiarize themselves with their chakra. So Naruto sat down and began feeling the chakra in his body. It wasn't hard. Naruto had always had a lot of chakra. In fact, finding his chakra had been the one thing he had been able to do before the other academy students. He simply had so much that he did not need to actually spend time looking for it, it was already right there. Once he felt it, he began to channel chakra to his ears. At first he winced, having channeled too much chakra and hurting his eardrums as the various sounds of the world invaded them. But after a while he managed to find an appropriate balance of chakra. He listened to the different sounds of the forest, or training ground. He could hear several birds chirping and some animals that were scurrying around on the ground. He heard running water, so there was a pond or stream not too far from him. it had probably been where his clones had caught those fish. He also heard other sounds coming from the forest of death, roars, hisses and other odd noises that sounded like they came from some kind of ferocious beasts. The place sounded like something from a nightmare. He shook the thought off and began channeling chakra to his nose. Once again he channeled too much and had to immediately cut back. However, when he found the right amount of chakra where it no longer hurt, he began to try and differentiate the scents he picked up. It was hard since he did not know what some of the things he could smell were. But he did manage to pick up the scent of the trees, the dirt and gr of the field. Other scents he could smell, but simply not recognize. After a while Naruto stood up. He did not know how long he had been meditating, but he was getting bored. And a bored Naruto was a dangerous Naruto. Deciding to test his taijutsu limits, Naruto put his hand in the ram sign, Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He shouted. There was a large burst of smoke, and when it cleared, Naruto could see nearly 400 more clones than there had been in the field. Alright, all of you who I just summoned, this is gonna be a battle royal, all of you versus me. Naruto grinned as he got into the beginning stance for Muay Thai. His stance is near perfect as could be on his first day ever. Let the kicking commence. Without delay Naruto charged into his clone's head first. Little did he know that he was being watched from afar by a curious observer who had been peeing through. Naruto groaned as he flopped onto his bed, not even bothering to take off his clothes. He was not only utterly exhausted, but also sore in places that he did not even know existed. The numerous cuts and bruises he had all over his face and body were just now beginning to heal. Maybe fighting against 400 of his clones had not been such a good idea. Kicking, yeah right, more like getting my kicked. Naruto rubbed his sore where several of his clones had actually kicked him. Despite the pain Naruto was in, he felt good, really good. All that hard work had given him an odd feeling of satisfaction, and while Naruto did not feel like he had gotten super strong from that one sitting, he believed that he had made decent progress. This day had also been an eye-opener for the young blonde. Before today Naruto had never really trained. He did occasionally go out to an empty training field on occasion, and he would exercise quite often. But he had never done anything like this. Most of his time was spent throwing kunai and hoping they hit, or trying to come up with some bizarre move that he thought would look cool, with a name like Uzumaki Barrage or some other egoistical name. He realized that those times he had never really made much progress. He also felt that he was a little more mature. Maybe it was because of the clones he had been using. Perhaps they accelerated his mental age since he technically lived all of those clones' lives, or at least remembered those clones living their lives from their perspective. Or it could be the meditation he had done at the end. He still hated it, but he had felt better afterwards, well, better until his clones had beat the holy hell out of him. Stupid clones. Or perhaps his change in mentality was due to the events that had transpired and led him to where he was now. Before Naruto had been ignorant, he had not known why he was hated, or why he was treated unfairly in CL by the majority of teachers, or why the other students constantly made fun of and belittled him. Now he did. The Mizuki incident had opened his eyes. And he had promised not just himself but the Hokage, a man he looked up to as a grandfather, that he would become the best shinobi and Hokage ever. And he would be the best Hokage ever. Naruto was sure of it. All he had to do was prove to the people of this village that he was not the Kyuubi, earn the people's respect by becoming a powerful ninja, and show how far he was willing to go to protect the village. Then they would see him for him. Easy, right? Looking over at the clock, Naruto saw that it was nearing 10 o'clock. With a stifled yawn, Naruto shut his eyes and peed out. Tomorrow and the rest of the week would be just as busy as today had been. Hopefully he could get stronger before it was time for the genin emplacement. The next day. The next morning saw Naruto doing much the same as he did yesterday. His clones had split off into 4 groups of 25. They would again work on chakra control, taijutsu, bujutsu, and then reading and fuinjutsu, calligraphy for the moment. Meanwhile, Naruto would do his physical workout. It was a little harder than before. Naruto had decided to increase the weights by 10 pounds, so he was having a few problems. But he still managed to pull through his routine, and this time, he was not quite as exhausted, since his body was already adjusting due to the Kyuubi. Naruto began having his clones dispel in groups of 10, that way he would not pee out from memory overload. He created 4 more and told them to go out and hunt. Meanwhile, he was getting the things necessary for the fire pit. However, as he was walking, Naruto heard the distinct whistling of kunai, a sound he had grown intimately familiar with yesterday during his battle royal. Dropping the rocks in his hand, Naruto rolled forward, pulling a kunai from his pouch at the same time. Standing back up, Naruto looked over where he had been to see an odd flat kunai sticking out of the ground. Looking around, the blonde tried to find where the person who tossed the kunai was located, even going so far as to channel chakra through his nose and ears. When he didn't find anyone, Naruto became impatient. "Oi, show yourself before I kick your..." Naruto shouted, a bit of his old self coming back. Several kunai were launched from within the trees. Naruto dodged some and blocked others, tossing his kunai into the trees they had come from. He was not very good at throwing kunai, having been focusing in other aspects, but he had merely wanted his opponent to reveal himself. Or rather herself. For it was a female who jumped out from within the trees. As she landed on the ground in front of him, Naruto got a good look at the woman. Said woman was wearing clothing that could be considered more of a lack thereof than anything else. She had on a dark orange miniskirt that barely covered her unmentionables, a fishnet shirt that once again did really nothing to cover her. It was especially bad since she had no bra under it as far as Naruto could see. Over that she had a tan trench coat that covered just enough of her ass that Naruto could not see her nipples. She was wearing a pair of standard shinobi sandals with shin guards over them and had a Konoha headband on her head that held up dark purple hair that looked kind of like Shikamaru's pineapple hairstyle. The sight of this woman, who Naruto actually found really beautiful, read why, he's just too innocent to think that right now, and yet at the same time frightening for some reason, made him blush and look away. Of course, this caused the woman to grin at him. "I take it you like what you see, kiddo." Well, it's, Naruto blushed as he began to sputter nonsensical words. Anko's grin widened. "You know I usually castrate men for staring at me, so you should be lucky I'm making an exception this once." Those words seemed to reboot Naruto's mouth as he turned back to her. "You know, I really don't think you have any right to attack men for looking at you. Since your clothing you're wearing, or perhaps I should say the clothing you're not wearing, makes you stand out more than Sasuke Tem does when he's running around town from his fangirls." "Oh ho," Anko said with an amused smirk, "so the Gaki can speak after all. You know I had almost taken you for a mute." Naruto scowled. "Look, I'm not in the mood to play games with you, whoever you are. I need to get back to my training, so why don't you tell me why you're here or leave?" "Now don't take that tone of voice with me, Gaki," Anko said in a teasing tone. Before Naruto could even blink, Anko tossed a kunai that cut across his cheek before reappearing behind him, another kunai held to his neck. "Holy shit," Naruto thought, his eyes widening. "She's fast. I didn't even see her move. I was just curious to see who was training out here is all," Anko said in a pouty-sounding voice as she wrapped her arm around his neck and pressed her chest into his back. She grinned as Naruto released an involuntary shudder and his blush came back full force. "Really? I mean, when you get a new neighbor, it's common courtesy to greet them." "Neighbor?" asked Naruto as he tried to ignore the feeling of the woman's S pressed against his back. Having never had to deal with any kind of physical contact from a member of the opposite, except for the times Sakura hit him, he had absolutely no clue what to do in this situation. Anko said with a grin as she leaned closer to him. Naruto blushed when the woman licked the blood off his cheek, causing Ank's grin to widen, though she was slightly disappointed and confused when she saw that it was already healed. "This training ground is right next to my home away from home," She pointed over to the forest of death. You train there? Naruto asked incredulously. He did not know what was in there, but if what he had heard the other day was any indication, it was not a friendly place. Yup, Anko said, smiling at him. It's such a great place. All the creatures there that would like nothing more than to kill you, the giant tigers that love to feast on human flesh, spiders, man-eating plants. As Anko continued to list off all of the amazing animals that could be found within the forest, Naruto was thinking about other things. Dear Kami, this woman must be crazy to go in there. And listen to her talk, it's like she gets off on life and death situations. As he continued to listen, his mind went down a different path. Although she does seem strong, I didn't even see when she threw that kunai and then she moved right next to me in an instant. It was obvious that when she had first gotten my attention she was toying with me. I wonder. You never told me your name, Naruto interrupted the scantily clad Kunoichi, who was currently talking about the best way to eat dango. How she got on that topic without Naruto noticing is anyone's guess. Well, since you're asking, why don't you tell me your name first, Gaki? Anko said. Naruto gave her a cheeky grin. Since you interrupted my training to introduce yourself, I believe it's common courtesy for you to give your name first. Hey, well, I suppose you got me there, Anko smirked. Well, alright, I am the Super Y Midorishi Anko. Naruto gave the woman a grin as he turned around after she let go of him. And I'm Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage of Konoha. He stuck out his hand. Pleased to meet you. Anko blinked in surprise. Wait, this is the Kyuubi Gaki. Last time I saw him he was wearing that hideous orange jumpsuit. She had not seen the boy often. Usually she would spot him after he had done some kind of prank and started running from the Chunin, Jonin and occasional Anbu afterwards. She actually found the boy's pranks to be pretty funny and had always looked forward to seeing what kind of havoc he would cause next. Anko looked the boy up and down. Well, he definitely looks more like a shinobi in that. I wonder what happened to his jumpsuit. Pleasure to meet you, Gaki, Anko said, taking the hand and shaking. One of Naruto's eyes twitched. I told you my name so you would use it. Anko's grin threatened to split her face. I know. Naruto was about to growl at her when he remembered how fast she had been and his disgruntlement vanished. Hey Anko, said woman looked at him. That was really awesome the way you were able to throw that kunai so quickly, and then you got behind me like super fast. So I was wondering if you would be willing to help with my training. Anko's eyes actually widened for a second. She had not thought he would actually request something like that, or request anything at all really. Truthfully, she had just been curious to see who was near her turf, since most people stay away from any training ground near the forest of death, and had hoped that he would amuse her. However, she thought about the request. She would not be able to spend much time with the boy, but she was curious. She knew of the child. Hell, everyone knew of Uzumaki Naruto. Aside from being just the Kyuubi brat, as some of the civilians had called him, he was also known as the prankster king from hell, as well as the dead last of his CL. In fact, she had heard that the only reason he graduated was because he managed to help that Chunin Academy teacher Iruka catch Mizuki with a high-level jutsu. Yet here he was, training with a buttload of Kage Bushin, truly an ingenious training method and something she suspected only he could really do. He was still totally rough around the edges. She could tell that he had just started learning his taijutsu style. Even with the clones his moves were sloppy. Better than most on their first day, but still sloppy. What makes you think I would want to train a brat like you? Asked Anko. Naruto growled as his eyebrows twitched. Hey, I'm not a brat. You stew. He stopped right there and clenched his hands together, taking several deep breaths. Getting himself back under control, he looked at Anko and smirked. Because if you train me, you'll be able to brag about how you trained the future Hokage of Konoha. Future Hokage of Konoha, huh? Anko mumbled with a smirk. She had been getting bored with the monotony in her life anyways. who knows, maybe training some brat would actually be fun. Okay, you got yourself a deal, Gaki. Just meet me at the entrance to Training Ground 44 tomorrow and we'll begin the training. Which training ground is Training Ground 44? Asked Naruto, completely oblivious to her slight slip-up. Anko grinned and pointed to the forest where he had heard all of the creepy noises coming from the other day. Naruto felt an involuntary shiver run down his spine but agreed anyways. After all, how often was it that he actually had someone aside from the old man pay attention to him? The next day, Naruto cursed as he dodged the incoming snakes that were launched at him from the left. Jumping over to the next tree branch, Naruto panted a bit as his cuts healed and the bit of snake venom in his body was flushed. Standing up, Naruto looked around in fright. He had met Anko today just outside of Training Ground 44 as asked. Naruto had been hesitant to follow her when she had begun walking in the forest, but at her insistence he had followed. Almost immediately after that, the hunt had begun and he had been running ever since. Anko had disappeared and then began to play a game of death tag, using snakes, kunai and anything else she could think of throw at him. He had yet to see her since, only catching a few glimpses of her here and there, right before she launched a snake or some other projectile at him. To top it off, there were all of the creatures that were in here that seemed to be flocking to the noise he was making in his haste to get away from the crazy snake using Jonin. Everything from giant spiders to large man-eating plants were there, and all of them trying to kill and devour him. So he had to not only worry about Anko, but also worry about the creatures in the forest. Training my. Naruto growled to himself. I'm starting to think she just wanted to torture some poor sap, and I was unlucky enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was beginning to regret asking Anko to help train him. Hearing a snap from behind, Naruto rolled to the left, just dodging a giant spider that had tried to land on top of him. Grimacing, Naruto grabbed a kunai and wrapped an explosive tag around it. He had tried early on to kill these things another way that would be less wasteful, but had learned that he did not have enough physical strength to kill them with just muscle power yet, even when it was enhanced by his chakra. And Naruto had not actually bothered to learn jutsu either, preferring to get his basic skills in chakra control, tai and bujutsu up to snuff. He told himself as soon as he was out of here he was going to learn some jutsu that would get through these things' thick hides. As the spider began to move towards him, Naruto threw the kunai. It managed to hit the creature right in the left eye, one of its only weak points. This was the only good thing this damn forest had given him right now, better aim, since without it he would have been killed from wasting so many kunai. The creature shrieked and thrashed in pain, however it still continued to charge after Naruto. Putting his hands in a ram seal, Naruto activated the explosive tag. He jumped off the branch as the creature's head exploded in a gout of blood and brains. Bouncing from branch to branch, Naruto eventually landed on the ground. He leaned up against the tree, panting as he tried to get a breather. Before he could, however, several kunai came at him from above. Naruto pulled out his own kunai and deflected some away from him as he rolled across the floor. Coming up on his feet, Naruto's eyes widened as Anko swooped down on him like some kind of bird of prey. He dodged her first kunai slash, jumping back as he tossed his own kunai at her. Anko merely caught and threw it back twice as fast. Naruto was able to dodge the attack but was not fast enough to dodge it entirely and ended up getting a nick on his left arm. Deciding to test his taijutsu, Naruto ran towards Anko. He ignored the fear that welled up inside of him when he saw her grin. Anko flicked out her hands and shouted, "Sanejishu, hidden shadow snake." Several snakes were launched from her sleeves. She had used this jutsu enough in the time he had been running from her that Naruto had come to expect it and dodged to the right. What he did not expected was for the snakes to change in mid-direction, coming at him from behind and wrapping tightly around him. Charging at an opponent who is clearly superior to you is just stupid, Anko said with a large grin on her face. She had actually had fun today. Naruto winced as his bones compressed. Yeah, I kind of figured that, but at the moment I don't have many jutsu to use. Kage Bunshin, Henge, Kariwimi and my own Warok no jutsu and that's it. None of those can be used for long-range attacks, and you're too fast for me to track to even think of using my kunai. Anko nodded. This is true, but you should have taken the time to think ahead and set up some traps or something instead. It's kind of hard to do that when you're busy fighting for your life. Naruto deadpanned as Anko's snakes disappeared in a puff of smoke. Anko rubbed the back of her head. Yeah, I suppose it is, huh? Naruto's eyebrow twitched. But then again, in real life, you're going to have to think quickly or you'll get yourself and others killed in the field. Naruto winced as he rubbed his sore ribs. Yeah, I know. Now then, Anko rubbed her hands together. Since I was kind enough to help you train, you're going to buy me some dango. What? Naruto asked, thinking he hadn't heard her clearly. Yep, that's right, you're going to buy me some dango since I was gracious enough to help you, Anko stated. But fine. Naruto sighed when he saw her pout. This would probably take the last of his money, but she had helped him, and now that she had brought the I helped you trump card, he would feel guilty if he did not do as she asked. Where are we going? He held his head down as he mourned the coming loss of his money. Anko smirked as she grabbed Naruto and began dragging him to her favorite dango stand. Ah, that was good, Anko said, patting her satisfied stomach. She had taken him to the place she usually got dango from, and like she had commanded, he had paid for her meal. Of 14 plates of dango. Naruto was actually unsure whether to be shocked or impressed that this woman seemed capable of eating almost as much as he could. Glad you liked it, Naruto said dryly, listening to his stomach gurgle a bit. Anko blinked as she too heard the sound. If you're so hungry, why didn't you eat as well? Naruto sighed, thinking about lying to her, but he had been talking to her, or at least, he had listened to her ramble, and found out her profession was in torture and interrogation, so she would specialize in catching lies. You already cleaned me out of money, Naruto said with a sigh, holding up his empty frog wallet. Until I begin going on missions, I don't even have enough money to pay for utilities. Anko actually looked down a bit at that, actually starting to feel bad that she had pretty much just eaten him out of all his money. Contrary to popular belief, she was not some heartless bitch like most of the villagers made her out to be. However, she had to put up a hard front or the villagers would try to har her like they had after her sensei. She shook her head of the thought and looked at the blonde in front of her. Then why did you actually agree to pay for my food? She asked. Because you helped me, Naruto shrugged as if that explained everything. You're the first person to ever help me this directly. Even Hokage Ojisan hasn't helped me like that. Anko actually felt worse at hearing that. What about your stipend? You're an orphan, right? Don't you get some kind of monthly allowance or whatever? Naruto shrugged. Yay, when I was a civilian. But now that I'm a shinobi, I won't be getting one anymore since I'm considered an adult. He noticed her guilty expression and sighed. Look, don't worry about it. I can see about getting some kind of part-time job when I'm not on missions, so it should be fine. That is, if anyone will actually let me work. Anko looked at him oddly before shaking her head. You know, you're a weird kid. I eat away the last of your money and you tell me not to worry about it. Great. Now you actually made me feel bad. She groaned for a moment and looked at Naruto. So tell you what, I'll help train you when I'm not on missions or torturing some poor sap, for free instead. In return, all you have to do is start giving me a good fight. Naruto looked at Anko for a moment, thinking about the offer. It wasn't bad, all things considered. Yeah, she kind of scared the shit out of him. Actually, she really scared the shit out of him. But she was also super strong from what he had been able to determine today. Strong enough to wipe the floor with him at least. He gave her a large grin. You've got yourself a deal. Tsunejishu, Hidden Shadow Snake, C-rank offensive jutsu. Allows the user to project several snakes from their wrist as they make punching motion towards their intended target. The snakes bite and wrap around the given target, potentially inflicting multiple wounds. They are also capable of poisoning a victim. Henge Transform E-Rank Supplementary. A basic technique taught in all academies. This creates an illusionary transformation which can be used to transform into objects, such as items, animals or other people. This technique is merely an illusion and upon being displaced by an object peeing through will dispel. Kariwimi Body Replacement E-Rank Supplementary. This lets the user quickly switch places with another nearby object, usually a log but can be done with others like a plant, animal or even a person, leaving the opponent to counterattack. Many forms of debate have gone about as to what kind of jutsu this is. Some are under the belief that this jutsu is in fact a space-time ninjutsu at its most basic. Space-time jutsu includes jutsus such as the Hiraishin used by the Yondaime Hokage. Oroiki no jutsu, Y-jutsu, E-rank, or a rank, depending on who you ask. The technique utilizes the true transformation technique, or shadow transformation in order to transform into a beautiful woman. Unlike standard transformations, this is a real transformation which creates a chakra construct that envelops the user. It was early in the morning as Naruto went about his daily exercise routine. Anko had gone on a mission today, so she was not here with him like she had been the past couple of days. Not that he was going to complain. The woman's training method may be effective, though if you asked Naruto it was more torture than training, but he really had no desire to come home looking like a walking bruise today. Not to say his training had not been progressing well. Even Anko had been impressed by how quickly he was learning, though her way of saying that was, "Wow. Keep this up and maybe you won't continue to." Yeah, not exactly the nicest thing for someone to say when giving out compliments. Still, he would not complain about her or her training methods. Each day they sparred or he would be forced to run from her in the forest of death. He would last just a little bit longer, meaning he was just a little bit stronger than he had been when first starting. And really, wasn't that the whole point in training? Nato's chakra control was getting better. He could now float 5 leaves on one hand, each of his fingers, and rotate them. His clones were beginning to work on the other hand now. It was his hope that he would master this soon and then get started on tree climbing, since the idea of being able to walk on a solid vertical surface was the coolest thing he could think of. Even if he had promised not to do pranks, he could just imagine all of the potential that ability would have had for his pranking career. His taijutsu was better, still nowhere near enough to beat a Jonin like Anko, or even one of the better Chunin, but it was still good enough that Anko had been impressed with the short amount of time it took for him to learn it. Normally during their training, Anko would literally tear his taijutsu apart, picking the entire style apart piecemeal. Often when she found a weak point in his guard, or an attack that would overstretch him, she would take full of advantage of it, beating him into the ground before telling him what he did wrong. After all, there was nothing like getting your kick to make sure you really did not want to get your kicked again. His physical strength also had increased a bit. His arms weights were now at 30 pounds while his leg weights were at 40 pounds. The ability he had to increase his weights faster than normal was thanks to his healing factor. Naruto had found out that when his muscles ripped or his bones broke, the Kyuubi's chakra would come out of the seal and heal his body, making it twice as strong at the break. It was probably the one good thing that had come with the Kyuubi so far. Bujutsu was a bit slower than the other things he was trying to learn, especially since learning to use a weapon was a completely new experience unlike taijutsu. He was still getting better every day, but learning to use a staff was harder than everything else he was working on. Surprisingly enough, it was his studies in Fuinjutsu that made the biggest leap. He had been told that the art was one of the hardest to learn, however Naruto seemed to take to it like a fish to water. He had already read the basic book and was reading the first level intermediate book. His ability to actually make seals was a little slow, having been forced to make his handwriting perfect so that he would not accidentally make some mistakes on the seals and have it blow up in his face. Still, he understood the subject well, and had hoped that he would eventually be able to create some seals without it killing himself. He had also learned a few new jutsu that Anko had decided to teach him. The first one was the Kunai Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Kunai Shadow Cone Jutsu, and its shuriken variant. It was a simple C-rank jutsu that multiplied the amount of kunai thrown and was used for bombardment of an enemy's position. The jutsu required little control, and for someone like Naruto who had learned the Kage Bushin in 1 hour, this jutsu was simple. Aside from that, he had also learned the Bushin Daibakua, Great Exploding Clone. This had in all honesty become his favorite jutsu. Basically, it was a shadow clone that you simply overloaded with chakra to make it explode. The key to doing this was to send a large dose of chakra to the clone in one go, rather than gradually building chakra in it like when he created reinforced clones. Other than that, his aim with kunai and shuriken had gotten better. He could now hit a moving target with some degree of accuracy. He had also found the limit to his seemingly limitless energy, though that had come from spending several hours playing death tag with Anko in the Forest of Death. The last of Naruto's accomplishments was with his issue of money. Originally he had been tempted to go and see if Kato would be willing to let him work there for money, however he had decided against it since the man had already been so kind to him and he did not want him to lose customers for having the demon brat working for him. The solution had been for Naruto to create Kage Bushin and have them henge into regular people. They would go and find a job to earn money and he could continue his physical exercise. So far he only had 2 of them that found a job. A female clone with long black hair and brown eyes he had named Akira, and a male clone that looked like an older version of him except with brown hair and gray eyes, neither of them had whiskers, called Kian. Akira had managed to get a job working as a waitress for one of the Akamaiki-owned barbecue restaurants. Surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, the girl was a hit. Of course, Naruto had learned from Anko that appeal goes a long way towards being popular, with guys at least, and since Akira was basically just his Warok no Jutsu with some minor altercations, different colored hair, eyes and wore clothes, she was very, very popular. His other clone had gotten a job working as a clerk for a grocery store. Of course he knew there would be a problem with the 2 clones later on. Eventually Naruto would be forced to leave Konoha for missions. When that happened he would not be able to make his clones to do their jobs. But he was trying to work on a solution for that, and had even already thought of a possible answer. But it would have to wait until he got better at Fuinjutsu. Looking up at the sun as he finished his daily routine, Naruto realized it was time to get back home. Today was his last day to exercise before getting his Jonin Sensei ignited. Tomorrow was Sunday and he had decided to get some rest. After all, the body, even his body needed rest in order to keep from burning out. Naruto ordered his clones to dispel in groups before heading back to his apartment. The next morning Naruto got up and started getting ready for the day. After getting showered and dressed, Naruto moved into the kitchen where one of his Kage Bushin was trying to make breakfast. Naruto had decided to change his diet to a more healthy food than just ramen, having read that he needed to have more balanced and nutritious meals if he wanted to get taller, something he was desperate to do, even desperate enough that he would stop eating just ramen to do it. His clones had only recently started cooking, so nothing they made tasted all that good. But at least they hadn't burned the house down yet, so Naruto was counting his blessings. After eating his meal, Naruto left the house, locking the door before leaving. Hopping onto the roof of his building, the blonde made his way towards the Hokage Tower where he would get his ninja registration and photo ID. Naruto smiled as he made his way towards the academy so he could present his photo and registration to the Hokage. Walking in the door where the old man was, Naruto greeted him in the way that only Naruto could. He slammed the door open and shouted, "Yo Oji-san. I've got my registration." Sarutobi smiled as he looked up. "Ah, Naruto, how?" Sarutobi trailed off as he looked over at Naruto. He blinked as he took in the change of clothes that the blonde was wearing. The orange jumpsuit the blonde had on was gone. In fact, Sarutobi could not see anything other than the large cloak that the boy was wearing since it went all the way down to his ankles. He had only managed to catch a small glimpse before Naruto had moved his hand away from the door, but what he had seen was infinitely better than that orange jumpsuit he used to wear. The boy actually looked like a real shinobi with that outfit. It was surprising actually. He had not seen Naruto since the incident. In fact, no one seemed to have seen him since then. It had actually caused a bit of commotion among the villagers who had feared some kind of grand prank from the prankster king. Sarutobi himself had been concerned that the boy may have had some trouble coping with the new knowledge that he held the Kyuubi. However, it seemed as if he had been worried over nothing. Shaking himself from his thoughts, Sarutobi offered the boy he thought of as his grandson a smile. Well, this is certainly a surprise, Naruto-kun, though I am glad you took my advice. I like the new look, you look like a true shinobi. Naruto blushed a bit in embarrassment. You think so? Well, I thought if I was going to be a real ninja, I should change into something that made me look a little more ninja-ish. Sarutobi chuckled a bit. Indeed, I take it you are here to give me your registration. Naruto nodded as he gave the old man a grin. Yep. Walking up, he handed Sarutobi his ninja ID and registration. Naruto moved over to one of the seats and waited for Sarutobi to approve it. After a few moments of studying the information and picture, Sarutobi nodded. The picture looks good. I can see you have matured greatly. Naruto beamed at the old Hokage's praise. To be honest, I expected you to do something like paint your face, or some other childish act. Hey! Naruto shouted indignantly, standing up and pointing at Sarutobi. I've grown up since then. I'm not some brat who would do something like that anymore. I'm an adult now. Sarutobi just gave the boy an amused expression. Yes, that is true, you do seem to have grown exponentially this week. I was merely talking about what you would have done before. Naruto calmed down slightly at that and gained a sheepish expression. He probably would have done something like that before. Well, I suppose you're right. Sarutobi smiled before remembering something. I forgot to mention something important the night of the incident, Naruto. Sarutobi began, catching the blonde genin's attention. Due to the fact that you were able to root out a traitor to Konoha and keep the Forbidden Scroll safe, I have listed it as your first B-rank mission. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise at the new knowledge. So I want you to come to my office later today so you can receive your mission pay. Really? Naruto asked. At Sarutobi's nod, he pumped his fist in the air. That's awesome. My first B-rank mission, and I only just started as a genin. I'll be Hokage in no time with this kind of track record. Sarutobi just chuckled at the overenthusiastic blonde. I am sure you will, Naruto. Speaking of Hokage, you might as well give me that hat right now, Oji-san. Seeing as how I beat you that night. Naruto said with a grin. Sarutobi blushed a bit, remembering just how he had been beaten. I am afraid that did not actually constitute as a fight, Naruto-kun, the old Hokage replied smartly. Therefore I can't actually give you my hat. Oh? Naruto asked with a devious smirk on his face. So if I were to beat you now, would you? Maybe you need a little reinforcement of just how badly you lost. Sarutobi paled as he saw the blonde putting up a familiar hand sign. Naruto, wait, don't. Waroke number jutsu. A cloud of smoke covered Naruto, and when it cleared enough to see, it was no longer Naruto that Sarutobi was looking at. He was now staring at a young blonde woman who looked to be about 18 years old. She had long blonde hair that was done up in two pigtails which traveled down to her butt. Her face was heart-shaped and lightly tanned, and she had a set of sky-blue eyes that held an alluring quality to them. She had a small nose, and on either side of her nose were three symmetrical whisker marks that seemed to add an exotic quality to her. Her lips were a light, moist pink that contrasted a bit with her skin and gave her a pouty and seductive expression. Her body was what one could only describe as perfection. Luscious-looking C borderline D cup S that, while not as large as his former student Tsunade, were amazingly round and perfect. A narrow waist with a flat-toned stomach led into flared hips with a perfectly round and firm butt. Going down even more were a set of mile-long legs that seemed to go on forever. She was also completely, with only small bits of smoke covering certain, key, areas. Yet that only seemed to add to her allure, leaving just enough to cover her with and make you want more. The Sandaime Hokage took all of 4 seconds to notice these key features about the woman. When he did, it only became a matter of time before he gave the inevitable perverted reaction. Boom. Like last time, the old Hokage was thrown back as a geyser of blood flew out of his nose. Ha. Looks like I got you good, Oji-san. Naruto shouted as he turned back into himself with a puff of smoke and held his stomach while trying not to fall on the floor. A few seconds later, Sarutobi managed to pull himself back up and set himself in his chair, dabbing his nose with a tissue. That jutsu again. I must admit it's very clever, but very dangerous. I'm going to have to list it as a kinjutsu. Naruto blinked as he looked over at the old man. So you're going to make this a forbidden technique? Sarutobi nodded. It seems much too dangerous to be placed in the wrong hands. The grin that stretched across Naruto's face threatened to split it in half. That's awesome. Ha, I just graduated and I already made a kinjutsu. I'll be Hokage in no time if I keep this up. Who kicks? That's right, Naruto kicks. Sarutobi looked at Naruto with an expression somewhere between amusement and exasperation as the blonde did a victory dance. Naruto, he watched as the blonde completely ignored him and continued dancing. Naruto. His voice was a little louder, hoping it would catch the blonde's attention. When it didn't work, he shouted, Naruto. What is it, Oji-san? Naruto asked as he stopped his victory dance. You need to calm down, you're a shinobi, remember? Reminded Sarutobi. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck as a sheepish grin crossed his face. Right, sorry. Sarutobi sighed, I swear sometimes. The old Hokage was interrupted as the door opened and a little kid rushed in with wooden shuriken in his hand. Now I've got you, old man. The child yelled, after I defeat you I'll become Hokage. Naruto blinked as he watched the kid run. He was wearing a head cap and a blue scarf that was several feet too long for him. If he keeps running like that, he's going to trip. As if on cue, the young boy's feet got caught up in his scarf and he tripped, landing flat on his face. Oh wow. The boy yelped as he put his hands on his face and rolled back and forth along the floor. Oh boy, Sarutobi thought as he sighed, if it's not one thing, it's another. The old Hokage pulled his Hokage hat down over his face in emberment. Naruto merely stared at the kid, wondering how the hell he could actually be dumb enough to wear a scarf that was so large. At the same time, a man wearing dark plain clothes and sunglasses appeared in the doorway, panting a bit. Gah, dang, did someone set up a trap to trip me? The kid shouted as he sat up, holding his head. Honorable grandson, are you alright? The man wearing the sunglasses asked. And pardon my observations, but there are no traps here, the surface is completely flat. The man said as he regained his composure, pushing his sunglasses up on his nose in what Naruto thought was a snooty gesture. Naruto just continued to look on at the scene, one eye twitching. Kami, I don't think even I'm that clumsy. The boy got up from the floor and looked around, noticing Naruto staring at him. At the same time, the man with the sunglasses spotted Naruto as well. It's him, the Kyuubi brat. He's the worst kind of troublemaker around. The man thought as he sneered at Naruto. Naruto, however, did not notice the man's sneer of disgust as the boy stomped up to him and pointed. It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who tripped me. He accused angrily, pointing a finger at him. Naruto's first reaction was to smack the kid, but he took a calm breath. It would not do for a ninja to hit a civilian. Slowly and deliberately, Naruto reached out and grabbed the boy's scarf, flinging it back and forth in front of the child's face. This, Naruto said in a slow voice as if talking to someone who was retarded. Is what you tripped over. Seriously, if you're going to wear something like this, get one in a smaller size so your clumsy feet can't trip over it. No, 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 no. The boy shouted as he stomped his feet on the ground. You did it. I know you did. Just admit it, you coward. That was enough for Naruto. No one called him a coward. Standing up, Naruto lifted the boy off the ground by the scruff of his shirt. Now you listen here, you damn brat. Naruto shouted through gritted teeth. I'm not a liar and I'm not a coward. You should be more careful when you're speaking to a shinobi, or someone might just end up putting you in your place. Uzumaki. Take your hands off of him this instant. The Sungle man shouted. He is the honorable grandson of our leader Sandaime Hokage-sama. Naruto paused as he turned to the man in the Sungle, thinking about what he said before turning to the kid in his grip. Huh, so this brat's related to the Hokage Ojisan. Naruto thought, since the Sungle man did not have any reason to lie to him. That's right, the boy thought with a smirk. He's just like the rest, stopping from doing something as soon as he learns who I am. Feeling confident that nothing would happen to him now, the young boy took this opportunity to gloat. What's the matter, tough guy? I thought you were gonna teach me a lesson. Afraid because the Sandaime Hokage is my Ojisan. Despite being held up in the air, the young child puffed out his chest. Naruto's eyes twitched several times. I don't care if he's your Obaa-chan. Naruto yelled as he dropped the boy on the floor and smashed a fist onto the top of his head. Konohamaru, who had tried to get up from being dropped, fell back to the floor as Naruto smashed a fist on his head. This guy's different, thought Konohamaru as he hit the ground again. The man wearing the Sungle looked scandalous. He just altered the honorable grandson. Sarutobi merely sighed and shook his head. What a mess, he muttered. Damn brat, Naruto grumbled. He looked up at Sarutobi. I'll be heading Ojisan, I need to clear my head. Naruto walked out of the room grumbling about stupid brats, needing to learn their place. The Sungle man whirled on his leader. Hokage-sama, how could you let that? He stopped as soon as he noticed his leader's harsh gaze. That delinquent do something like that to your grandson. He must be punished. Punished? Sarutobi questioned, raising an eyebrow. For what exactly? It's not like he did any permanent damage, Ebisu. And Konohamaru did deserve that for questioning and insulting Naruto-kun the way he did. The old Hokage sighed. Now then, if you could take care of this. He gestured over to Konohamaru, who was sitting back up with a groan. Honorable grandson, are you alright? Ebisu asked, helping the boy to his feet. Hey, where'd that guy go? Konohamaru asked, looking around. He had to find him. That guy was different from the others. He didn't treat him special just because of who his grandfather was. Ebisu looked at Konohamaru with a frown as he pushed his GLS up. Now you must listen to me, honorable grandson. You must not associate yourself with juvenile delinquents like that, nor should you attempt to draw him into a conflict even if he does deserve it. Ebisu lectured the boy. He is far beneath you, so you must not stoop to his level. As your distinguished Jonin sensei, I am never wrong about these things, which means I am always right. Ebisu smirked to himself as he turned to look at the village through the open balcony on the left side of the room. I'm above the more mundane trainers, so you must heed my every word. Your goal is to become the next Hokage, and I can teach you the best way to go about it. Indeed, stick with me and you will gain the shortcut to becoming Godime Hokage. You understand, don't you, honorable grandson? Ebisu asked as he turned around, only to find himself talking to thin air. Where did he go now? Ebisu wailed. I believe he followed Naruto, but I have no idea where they're headed. Sarutobi offered up in a calm and casual tone as he lit his pipe. What? Ebisu shouted in shock and consternation. This is a disaster. Ebisu ran out of the room and down the hall. How did Konohamaru-kun turn out to be like that? The old Hokage had to wonder, sighing a bit as he took a puff of his pipe. He's quite determined. That was his 10th sneak attack today alone. He thought to himself as he blew out a few smoke rings. Although if he hangs around Naruto he might learn a thing or two. He paused in his thoughts and grimaced. At least so long as Naruto doesn't teach him anything tricky. The image of a blonde woman quickly sprang to mind before he banished it. Sighing, Sarutobi looked down at the paperwork he had gotten from Naruto and began to read it over. Naruto sighed to himself as he walked down the street, the confrontation with the little boy already placed in the back of his mind. As he wandered around the village, the blonde tried to figure out what he should do. Today was supposed to be his rest day, so he wasn't going to be doing any training. However, because he had told himself that he would no longer do any pranks, he didn't really have anything else to do. Maybe I can go visit Tenten, Naruto thought. He had not really spoken to her much, but she had treated him like a normal person, unlike most of the people in this village. Though she may be out of the village or with her team. I could just go and look at some of the equipment since I need to buy some more kunai and explosive notes. Naruto made a silent curse to Anko for making him waste so much equipment on those damn monsters in the Forest of Death. Then he sighed, of course it would only be looking since I don't have as much money right now, and what I do have I need to save for my housing bills. Naruto's thoughts trailed off as he noticed a cloth that was near the fence that was designed to blend in with it, except that it was dirtier than the rest of the fence. And being held sideways. And there were a pair of hands holding it up on either side, and a pair of feet sticking out of the bottom and a small tuft of hair sticking out of the top. He can't seriously think that's going to work on me, does he? Naruto thought with a sweat drop. Sighing, he went over to the camouflaged child and grabbed the cloth, pulling it down. I take it you want something, seeing as you're following me? Naruto asked in a bored tone. He really didn't feel like dealing with this brat right now. I'm impressed that you saw through my disguise, your reputation is well earned. Konohamaru said with a large smile as he pointed at Naruto. So that settles it. I'll be your apprentice and you'll be my trainer. Naruto blinked. What? He asked slowly, as if not understanding. Yeah, you gotta teach me that Warok no Jutsu thing you used to beat Ojisan. Konohamaru shouted as he bounced on the balls of his feet. Hey, hold on. Who said anything about me teaching you? Asked Naruto. What the hell was with this brat? Thinking he would just up and teach someone he did not even know. Come on. Please. Please, please, please say yes, boss. Konohamaru begged. What, boss? Naruto asked, tilting his head in a quizzical expression. Yeah, that's right. You're the boss. Boss, boss, boss. Konohamaru shouted as he jumped up and down. Naruto looked up at the sky as he scratched the bottom of his chin. Well, he was getting bored and had been trying to find something to do. Well, I suppose I can give you some pointers, but it will only be for today. Naruto said, looking at the overactive child pointedly. What? Konohamaru cried out, looking ready to complain. Why only today? Because tomorrow I have genin orientation, so I won't have any free time after that. Naruto said with a smirk as he pointed to the headband on his head. Or did you not notice the headband? Konohamaru looked at the headband and his eyes widened. Sugoi. That's so cool. I suppose it is. Naruto took a step back at the boy's enthusiasm. Anyways, let's head over to one of the parks. Naruto smirked as he jumped up onto the roof of one of the buildings. It was one of his more recent accomplishments, being able to jump that high by using his chakra. But it did a good job of making Konohamaru get all starry-eyed. I hope you can keep up. Naruto shouted and began to jump to another building. Konohamaru, who did not have the chakra control for that, had to travel on the ground. Naruto always made sure to stay in the boy's sight as he hopped across the rooftops, making sure that the boy had to make a concerted effort to follow him. He made sure to circle the parks at once or twice before heading over there. By the time they had reached the park, Konohamaru was stumbling and falling over as he panted for breath. He fell down onto the ground as he looked up at Naruto, who was sitting on a tree branch a few feet above him. What was that for? Konohamaru asked as he tried to regain his breath. Naruto frowned at how tired the boy was. Are you in the academy? He asked. Konohamaru looked indignant, or as indignant as an exhausted 8-year-old could look. He stood up only to fall back down. Of course I am I. What are you doing sitting on the ground like that? Interrupted Naruto. Stand up. Konohamaru glared at him. I'm tired from you making me run all over the place. Naruto shrugged. That wouldn't even constitute for my morning runs. If something as mildly strenuous as that made you tired, then you're obviously not training your body enough. Man, this is weird. The blonde thought. I wonder if this is what Iruka-sensei felt like when he gave me a lecture. He had to admit that, while it felt odd, it was also satisfying to actually be able to teach someone else. Maybe there really was a point to all of those boring lectures Iruka-sensei gave. Anyways, Naruto shook his head of thoughts on Iruka. Since you're so exhausted, it's obvious that your chakra reserves are too small to do anything more than the basic jutsu. So I think we'll start with. Hey, Konohamaru shouted with an angry expression on his face. I am not small. Naruto face-palmed as he listened to the little kid. Please Kami, tell me this is not how I sounded to Iruka-sensei and Oji-san. If it is, I swear I'll never be such a brat again. I said your chakra. Chakra. Naruto pronounced the word chakra extra slowly. I made no comment on your height. I am merely saying that your chakra reserves are a tad on the small side. This means you'll have to work on getting your reserves up to snuff. I'll write down a few exercises I found in a book and give them to you to practice on your own. Naruto paused for a moment. Though if your reserves are smaller, then you should have better control. Tell me, how good is your chakra control? He asked. Well, I don't really know much about that, Konohamaru admitted. Four Eyes Sensei hasn't gone beyond what the academy has already taught me. Naruto sighed and rubbed a hand over his face. Which means you have had absolutely no practice in chakra control. He paused. Come to think of it, he hadn't been taught chakra control exercises either. Though, he had UMed, it had been one of the days he had been sent out of CL, or skipped. He frowned to himself before shaking his head. Have you at least been working on the Henge no Jutsu? Please tell me you have. Konohamaru puffed up his cheeks indignantly. Of course I have. Alright, no need to get defensive. Naruto held up his hands in a defensive gesture as he jumped off the tree branch. So show me what you can do. I need to see how far along you are, before we can start doing anything. What should I transform into? Asked Konohamaru, scratching the back of his head. Naruto shrugged. Anyone, it doesn't matter so long as I can see where you're at. After that I'll show you some material I have to create your own version of the Warok no Jutsu. The thing about the Warok no Jutsu is it requires an innate understanding of the female body, or at least it does now. Naruto thought with a snort and a light blush. He had read 1 or 2 books on anatomy, and one of them was on female anatomy as well as a book on the reproduction system. Plus all that time he had spent with Anko this past week had pretty much guaranteed that he would know what certain female parts looked like. Naruto shook his head to clear. Alright, let's see what you can do. You got it, boss. Konohamaru shouted as he did the hand seal for the jutsu. Quote, Henge no Jutsu. Ebisu scowled as he looked out across the village from the roof he was standing on. He had been searching the village for the better part of an hour and it was getting on his nerves. Where is that filthy delinquent? What could he be doing to the honorable grandson? It could only be something truly evil. Ebisu thought viciously as he clenched his hands into fists as he scanned the streets. I am an elite Jonin. As one in a long line of senseis that have shaped and guided potential candidates to the illustrious position of Hokage, I cannot allow such a disaster to occur on my watch. I'll crush any insect that clings to my student, even if it is a Jinchuriki. Without a second thought he began hopping across the roofs, searching for any sign of the blonde brat or his wayward student. Naruto sighed as he dropped some change into a vending machine to get himself some soda. If only vending machines ended up taking over for shops, then I wouldn't go broke because of stupid prejudices. He shook his head of the thought, knowing that thinking something so negative would do him no good. Turning around he looked at his temporary student. The boy had done remarkably well for his first time, though Naruto could see signs of exhaustion setting in. Though, Naruto attributed his success to the fact that he had less chakra, therefore more control to use jutsu, making learning something like this easier. Walking over to Konohamaru, he sat down, popping his soda can and taking a long gulp. So, tell me, what was going on with you and Oji-san? It didn't seem like this was a singular event. Oji-san named me Konohamaru, after the name of the village. He said it would bring me luck. Konohamaru murmured. Naruto nodded to himself as he listened. You'd think that it would be easy to remember. But no one, not a single person in the whole village ever calls me by my name. It's because when they look at me, they don't see me, they see the honorable grandson of the Sandaime Hokage. Naruto raised an eyebrow as Konohamaru kicked a rock. They don't see who I am, just who I'm related to. It's like I'm invisible, hidden behind Oji-san's shadow, and I'm so sick of it, that's why I'm going to become Hokage now. So people will know who I really am. This kid has the reverse problem of me. Naruto thought incredulously. He's still basically ignored, but it's more of ignoring who he is, rather than his existence. The kid reminded him a lot of himself, how he used to be before the Mizuki incident. Not that something like this would make Naruto give the kid any sympathy. If anything, Konohamaru needed and kicking. Naruto snorted. You think it's that easy? Konohamaru looked up at Naruto. If you could become Hokage so easily, then everyone would try to be Hokage. The Hokage is not just the strongest ninja in the whole village, but he's also the smartest and the one who's dedicated his life to serving the village as its protector. You have to think of each villager as if they were a member of your family and be willing to put your life on the line to keep them safe. That is what being Hokage is about. And it will take hard work, dedication, blood, sweat and tears to get there. Not just anyone can be Hokage. Naruto suddenly grinned. Besides, if you're going to be Hokage, you're going to have to defeat me first. Naruto stopped as he watched Konohamaru, who was gaping at him, waiting for the boy to say something, when he heard a rustling of leaves. I've found you. A voice came from above them. Naruto and Konohamaru turned to see Ebisu standing on a tree branch. That filthy Uzumaki, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Ebisu glared down at Naruto, who could not hold in a flinch at those icy eyes. Those eyes, he recognized them as the same ones that some of the more hateful members of the village gave him. The kind of people who he was sure would kill him if they had the chance. The kind who would try to beat him if they caught him when they were drunk and had lost any inhibitions they might have once had. Leaping down from the tree, Ebisu landed on the ground and approached the two. Honorable grandson, it's time that you return home. Ebisu said in the same overly confident tone as before, adjusting his sunglasses. Konohamaru jumped to his feet. No way. I'm learning how to beat Oji-san and become Hokage. Don't interfere. Naruto couldn't hold in his smirk. It sounds like he thinks I'm a better teacher than you. Ebisu sneered at Naruto. Silence, Uzumaki. I will not just sit idle while you corrupt my student with your rubbish. Shut up. Konohamaru yelled. He's a better teacher than you'll ever be. At least I can understand what he says. Both Ebisu and Naruto were startled by the boy's exclamations. No, no, honorable grandson, you must not listen to him. He cannot teach you the things you need to know. To be Hokage, one must understand virtue, justice, ceremony, wisdom, loyalty, prudence, and be skilled in 1,000 jutsu. You don't even know one jutsu. Ebisu continued. However, it seemed that Konohamaru had heard enough. I'll show you a jutsu. Eat this. Waroke no jutsu. Where before there was a small brown-haired boy, now there was a tall, older and absolutely drop-dead gorgeous female with dark brown hair. And she was. How's this for a jutsu? She asked with a seductive voice as she made a pose. Ebisu froze and his jaw nearly fell to the floor. Naruto watched as the man shivered. However, he was still standing. Huh. Well, what do you know? Naruto thought to himself. He hides it well. Konohamaru poofed back into existence and frowned. Why didn't that work? He asked, scratching the back of his head. WHWH, what kind of disgraceful jutsu is that? Ebisu shouted indignantly, though Naruto could see the red tinge to his cheeks. Such things are not fit for the eyes of a gentleman. I would never fall for such a vulgar and outrageous jutsu. I am far above such things. Naruto's eyes began to twitch at the bold and obviously false declaration. Ebisu grabbed Konohamaru's scarf and tried to start dragging him back with him. Honorable grandson, you must stop this at once. That Uzumaki brat is turning you into a delinquent. Do you want people to see you as an imbecile? Only with my teachings will you gain the shortcut to becoming Hokage. Ebisu continued to pull on the scarf, trying to drag Konohamaru away. No, no, no. Just leave me alone. I don't want to learn from you. I'm learning from the boss. Konohamaru yelled as he yanked back. What sort of nonsense is this? Ebisu shouted back. The pair continued their little tug of war until Naruto decided to intervene. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. The pair paused when Naruto shouted and turned around to see around 50 clones puff into existence. Konohamaru looked at all of the copies with wide eyes. Come on. Why don't you pick on someone your own size? One of the clones shouted. Oh wait, I guess you were doing that. Another clone said. Well, maybe you can pick on someone bigger than you. Another spoke up. Ebisu sneered at the clones as he let go of Konohamaru, and walked into the group of Narutos. I'm not impressed. I am a Jonin, an elite ninja. Not some lightweight like Mizuki. Ebisu pushed up his GLS and gave an arrogant smirk. Yes, I heard of your run-in with Mizuki. And for someone who was pushed away by their own sensei, you have no right to lecture me, upstart. Now, watch closely, honorable grandson, and see how a real ninja fights. Konohamaru looked back and forth between Ebisu and the group of Narutos, not sure what to do, but praying that Naruto could win. Sarutobi sat down in his spying room. Iruka had visited him a little while ago and they had just finished a discussion about Naruto, and he was now watching the events on his spy orb. Naruto may have been fortunate against Mizuki, but this is most likely out of his league. Sarutobi frowned as he put his pipe in his mouth. Ebisu better be smart enough not to hurt him too badly, especially in front of Konohamaru-kun. And I think I'll need to talk to him about his attitude problem. Ebisu stood in the middle of the formation of Naruto's with a smirk in place. This kid didn't honestly think that a technique like this would be enough to beat him, and elite, did he? Well, he asked with a sneer and wry tone. All the Narutos grinned before putting their hands up in a hand seal. Warok number jutsu. All 50-something clones shouted, surrounding the area in smoke. When the smoke dissipated, Ebisu was altered by 50 very hot and very blonde girls, all of whom began grabbing at him. They began pressing and rubbing themselves against the now shock-still Jonin while whispered seductively into his ear, but all of their words were lost as the feeling of their s and legs and other parts pressing against the Jonin became too much. Ebisu shuddered, before being thrown out of the group of girls by the geyser that was his nose, shooting blood as he flew into the air. Naruto grinned as he saw the now completely unresponsive Jonin twitching on the ground a few feet away. A puff of smoke later, and all the clones dispelled. Turning to his shorter companion, Naruto grinned. And that is what I like to call harem no jutsu, harem jutsu. Sugoi. Konohamaru shouted, pumping a fist in the air. Sarutobi watched the events that transpired with a shocked look. Naruto seems to have gained quite the dangerous skill. Sarutobi thought. Combining his Warok no jutsu with the Kage Bushin no jutsu is a dangerous combination. I don't know if even I could survive that. He reached out and grabbed a tissue, dabbing away at his now bloody nose. Naruto looked at the still twitching Ebisu, satisfied that he wasn't going to be getting up any time soon. The blonde walked back over to Konohamaru. Aw man, I couldn't even get Four Eyes Sensei to fall for the jutsu. I want to be Hokage so badly, but I keep messing up. Why can't I do it? Konohamaru grabbed at his hair in indignation. Because becoming Hokage isn't easy, Naruto said. You want to be at the top right now, to be Hokage as soon as possible so people will see you for you. I know how you feel. Until recent circumstances, I was the same way. But the fact is, being Hokage is a long and hard road. You can't just become Hokage because you want to. It takes dedication, skill, hard work. You have to be willing to bleed, and cry, and sweat in order to be the strongest shinobi you can. You have to train both mind and body. But most importantly, you have to be willing to risk your life for the sake of this village and its people. And also, Naruto looked at Konohamaru with a serious expression, causing the younger male to gulp. You have to remember the most important truth about how to become Hokage. Oh yeah, Konohamaru shouted as he puffed out his chest. What truth is that? That there are no shortcuts to becoming Hokage. Naruto said, his eyes taking on a fierce and determined look. By trying to take the easy path, you limit yourself, you weaken yourself, because you weren't willing to take the harder road. Weren't willing to train until you dropped, or work until you felt all of your muscles straining against each other. No ninja in this village would respect a Hokage who took the easy way out of everything. Sometimes Hokages have to make hard choices and deal with the consequences of those choices. It takes a kind of commitment that very few people have, and those who don't have it need to get out of the way for those who do. Naruto stared at Konohamaru, the boy a little red in the face and looked like his eyes were on the brink of turning into swirls. He was trying to come to terms with all of the information he had just received and felt completely overwhelmed. However, one of the things Naruto had said rang through his mind. Besides, if you're going to be Hokage, you're going to have to defeat me first. Konohamaru turned away from Naruto and stuck his nose up. Who do you think you are? Lecturing me like that? Naruto smirked a bit at Konohamaru's reaction. That's it. I won't be your apprentice any longer. From now on we're rivals. Got it. Naruto just gave the kid a grin. Well, that's cool. This was a one-time deal anyway, because I'm getting ignited to my Jonin sensei tomorrow. However, Naruto's grin widened, stretching the whisker marks and making him look like a fox. I accept your challenge to be my rival. But keep this in mind, you're going to have a lot of catching up to do if you want to be at my level. You're going to have to train hard if you want to even think of competing against me for the title of Hokage. Naruto looked at the sun and sighed. He had just wasted a whole day training a kid. Well, it was fun and I was resting today anyway. Naruto thought with a chuckle. It was nice being able to act like nothing more than an overly wise kid and show off to someone else, something that he knew he probably would not get to do again. Well, I'm off. But don't for 1 second think you can just slack off. You never know when we might meet again, and I find out that you've been slacking. Naruto trailed off with the implied threat, causing Konohamaru to gulp. Alright then, I'll see you later, Konohamaru. Konohamaru felt his eyes widen as Naruto turned around and tossed a wave over his shoulder. Sarutobi smiled as he leaned back in his chair and watched Konohamaru give a salute to the leaving Naruto. Thank you, Naruto-kun, for helping Konohamaru-kun true path of a ninja. He sighed. I just wish he hadn't taught Konohamaru-kun the Waroke no Jutsu. Kunai Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Kunai Shadow Cone Jutsu, a basic C-rank jutsu that creates copies of thrown projectile weapons. Used for bombardment of enemy positions, distractions and creating distance between the user and his/her foes. Bushin Daibakua, Great Exploding Clone, A-rank Kinjutsu. Basically a cage bushin that is overloaded with chakra that will explode either when the user activates it, or it gets hit in some way. Herm no Jutsu, Harem Jutsu, S-rank Kinjutsu. This jutsu is simply a combination of the Shadow Clone Teknyu and the Y Jutsu. It is used to create any number of clones of beautiful women. This technique is known to many in Konoha as the pervert killer due to the MIV nosebleeds many perverts have suffered from it. This includes on Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, who after suffering MIV hemorrhaging decided to rank the jutsu as a forbidden SCL ninjutsu and place it in the forbidden scroll of sealing.